Hello. So, welcome to the stream. This is very impromptu. Again, I don't know if my voice is coming through, so people in the chat, please tell me. I've also had a huge problem with Google Hangouts, which is why this is a little bit late. I thought that Google Hangouts would still be working for private purposes, but apparently it's just completely not working. So, people tell me if you can hear my voice or not. And feel free to call me a boomer for the first 5 minutes. That's become a little bit of a tradition. So I would never deny anyone the pleasure of calling me a 30-year-old boomer, even though I am over 30. Uh, my Discord's cancer, yes, but it's all I have right now. So people might be seeing this. They see that I headhound because that's my Discord username since I was banned off of Discord for hate speech. God only knows why. I guess it was because I was a right winger. But if people are interested in coming on and discussing, they can join up through the Discord link. Otherwise, we'll just talk about general things. I didn't really have a huge agenda for doing this stream, but I was hoping to talk a little bit about just recent events. Quite frankly, I've been looking at the news and the recent shootings, and I've kind of gotten a little bit down on things. Obviously, I'm approaching a hiatus, as a lot of people have been mentioning, and it's something that it's just you kind of want to put a pin in the movement, a pin in sort of something you've been a part of for a very long time and have to take a step back from. And you know, I'm not so sure exactly what's going to happen, and that's sort of unsettling. I think that if you're a leftist, you may not be satisfied with the progress you're making, but at least you feel like the movement's making some strides forward. But anyway, if people want to come on, this is actually an open conversation. People can join up. You're going to have to DM me on Twitter. Actually, let me get on Twitter right now and alert people that if they're interested, they should DM me. So you guys have to forgive me. Everything's just been really behind today. I don't, you run around a lot, just with with all family obligations and whatnot. But I want to do this live stream because I was reading the news last night with the right wing shooters, the two right wing shooters. That I don't know if they're right wing or not, but I'm told that they're right wing, and it just you get the sense that everything you do, all the work you've done, can be immediately destroyed. Not to mention, obviously, the huge spiritual tragedy of what is it, the 20 people who died. And that's horrific. But additionally, with this whole political angle, you feel there is a sense that no matter what good people do to bring forward dialogue peacefully, it can be destroyed in an instant by crazy people. And there is a sensation I had, maybe this was because I just had come from watching a horror movie. I had this immediate sensation that there were these dark spiritual forces that were moving against all of our efforts to preserve something against just the onslaught of modernity and the left. And it felt it felt it was a moment of crisis, to be sure. And I felt that there was some need for a conversation to go on just about this, about people's concerns for the future. I know my wife was thinking about coming on and talking a little bit about our updates, but I think she's not feeling very well, so she's going to be sitting this one out. So, but in the meantime, anyone who's on here, or any questions you have, or any subjects you'd like discussed, this is really open time. And I didn't really have a huge agenda one way or the other, but hopefully people have interesting enough questions, and we can keep things going. We can talk about the shootings if you guys want, but it's we'll see how it goes. So I'll just start by answering the super chats, and then hopefully, or actually, I'll start by saying, if you're interested in joining me, DM. Pardon, guys. Okay. So thank you for your guys' patience. I think that really generally it's going to be interesting. I on my video release schedule, I'm trying to get done with a lot of projects. I'm At this point, I'm sort of dumping videos. If you haven't noticed this, I had a few that were on the shelf, and I'm just dumping them from the archive onto the public channel because I want to get the ideas out there before I have to go on hiatus and I might lose time. And I'm also trying to get the priorities out, or the ones that, at least the priorities that I feel passionate enough to talk about for an extended length of time. And at this stage, I know Millennial Woes and other right-wingers have said this as well. At this point, I am really burnt out on politics. I'm sure this is part of just not being able to continuously deal with sort of the pressures that comes from being on the outside of what's considered acceptable in your community to talk about. But it's also born from the fact that you can't really talk to your rivals. It's hard for me to talk to someone like Thought Slime, even someone like Ben Burgess. And because of that, the political conversation seems constantly to be going on inside an echo chamber. For instance, the democracy video. A video I had a lot of thoughts on. I had an outline written. It was very clear in my own mind. And I think it turned out all right. A few flubs on dates and a few misspellings in my slide aside. People know what I'm talking about who watched the video. It was an okay video, but I didn't feel like I had necessarily the passion I had for it that I took to, say, the one about the Edwardian archetype of femininity. And that's because the democracy video, the question for all videos is, who is the audience? Who is the video addressed to? The problem is that the obvious people to address the democracy video to are leftists. But leftists aren't going to watch that video, and no leftist is going to come on and discuss that video with me on this channel. I would love it if they could. And so the problem is that a fundamentally dialectic art form, aka honest political discussion, is reduced to kind of this weird monologue. And the reason why democracy didn't seem right was that as I was recording it, I knew that most of the stuff I was saying, people already understood. In fact, we were doing the classic leftist thing, and I noticed this was sort of a unique feature of these last 2 weeks, is that it seemed like every reactionary, distant right-wing person was making a video against democracy. Endeavor did it, Charlemagne did it, a few other people did it. And I know this is one of the main talking points, but still, the question was, who am I preaching to? I feel like, for the most part, I'm preaching to the choir. But let's I check my Twitter thing, and then I'm going to check. Okay, I'm going to make sure I'm following everyone who wants to come on. I think Fritz wanted to come on, but I'm not so sure he realized how late it was. I'll just DM him really quickly to make sure that he understands that he needs to. Okay. Okay, so let's I need to send out this this Discord link. I'm not so sure who can get into this channel. I apologize, guys. This is it is kind of interesting because I don't actually know how my own Discord server works, since after I got banned, I am more or less stopped paying attention to Discord. Oh, hey, there's Fritz. How's it going? Can you speak? Apparently not. Let me add the live roles to all the other people. Okay, I'm going to do 4 at a time, guys, because otherwise it's going to get way too crowded. So I apologize if you're late to the party, okay? Anyway, let's do super chats and then we can continue on just discussing random things. All right. So, super chats. Should I put this up on the Well, you guys can see it scroll through, so I don't feel like I need to actually put the super chat up here while I'm reading it. Okay. Fritz, I see you muted. Can you DM me if you're having a problem? Okay. Maybe I can disable push to talk. Okay, maybe I can change your permissions to contributor, and that will reduce your push to talk. Okay, this is kind of irritating here. Okay, here we go. Try this now. Can you say anything?
Hello?
Okay, great, perfect. That
Hi.
should do it. How's it going?
I'm okay. I'm okay. I'm actually thinking of. I was actually about to make a video. Well, tomorrow, sort of addressing an addendum to your democracy video, sort of how not how G.K. Chesterton envisioned the ideal of it, but how it seemed the ideal has been, and it's the way, at least to me, the way the progressives or the proponents of liberal democracy have taken it is absolutely horrifying because they take it in a way. I think it can be described as in we will as many corpses as it takes to make you change your government.
Hmm.
Because that's been
Well,
the reality of how these liberal democracies have spread.
yes. Well, I mean, that's obviously liberals would certainly contest that if, say, Steven
Yes.
Pinker were here. I think
Mm-hmm.
Mulbug believed in his essays about the subject of democracy, he believed that the bloodiness of the 20th century wars was due to the fact that all wars became about shifting the demographics of a country because of the
Um,
assumption that the countries would obtain popular sovereignty once the war was over. So you had to essentially remove the Germans or remove the Slavs from a certain country in order to establish permanent political dominance. That has been a theory for quite some time.
was that the result of World War One? Because that's the prime example I think of.
Well, that was a I don't know, but that was a fact in World War One. That's certainly more of a feature of World War Two.
Yeah, certainly,
I'm
but I
I
don't.
I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, obviously, everything in World War Two came from World War One at some stage, but
Mm-hmm.
anyway, let me read some super chats and perhaps we can continue a conversation
Sure.
that's inspired by those. So, there's 2 chats that came from the premiere of the Democracy video. I feel obliged to read them. Bubblegum Gun says, "Gas the Union and restore the Confederacy." Not so sure how he wants me to answer that. That's not even really a question. And for $5, he also says, "Corporatism is realistic. To think Nintendo is socialist is ridiculous. Yes, they use state power to protect assets in the same way people also do." I feel like I'm responding to a conversation that existed inside the premiere of the Democracy video, but it has nothing to do with the Democracy video. So I'm just going to move on from those because I don't even know what he means by corporatism. Nintendo is most assuredly a corporation. I think saying Nintendo is socialist, I never heard that. So for $5 on this actual chat, Creepy Weirdo says, "You ever notice how for $5, thank you for your contribution. You ever notice how a kind of obsession with Fred Rogers between the documentary and new film starring Tom Hanks? I think there is a video in there." Oh, he's
I
talking
had
about
a
the Mr. Rogers thing, right?
Yeah, yeah. I actually had a thought about that. It's sort of the same thing with people like him and Bob Ross, and I guess to a lesser extent, someone like Jim Henson.
Mm-hmm.
It's sort of this. nostalgia for, I guess, this sort of hippie era, but just this sort of idea of a of a
Well,
gentleness.
it's a previous. It's essentially nostalgia for an earlier America, but
Mm-hmm.
these characters that they're sort of hoisting up there is their icons of civility, a long past civility. They're really they're basically 1950s icons that exist after 1965.
Mm-hmm.
Because if
And
they were
even
before 1965, they couldn't be held up as icons because of the implicit involvement with quote unquote racism.
well, also in the fact that I think the way that they behaved was something that probably would have just been considered normal prior, or at least
Uh,
how they were perceived as the gentleness and sort of the them being the epitome of sort of you know being gentleness. But
Fred Rogers always seemed like he came from the 1950s, even though I think he had his heyday in the 70s and 80s.
mhm. But I think the problem though is that, and I think this might be what the movie's going to explore, or it's that because I recently learned that actually that Jim Henson, who if people don't know is the guy who founded the Muppet Corporation, was unfaithful to his wife and was not actually the best of people. I think the problem is that they sort of they're sort of always held up as these sort of moral paragons that there couldn't possibly be anything wrong with them. And I think there's a sort of mythology created that they're like that, like Bob Ross or Mr. Rogers are just these perfect human beings.
See, I know absolutely nothing about Bob Ross or Jim Henson.
Not many people know much because so much has been kept secret because people don't want like any disconcerting information to come out about him.
As a matter of fact, I was Bob Ross even really a thing? I never really knew his name until he became a hipster icon.
Yeah, he until he became a what?
Until he became a hipster icon. I mean, people always talked about the guy on PBS that painted happy trees, but I didn't know him as Bob Ross until really the late 2000s.
2011. But yeah. Well, that's the thing, right? It's I guess he became he gained a cult following. I guess during the internet age when once I think a lot of his episodes probably became more widely available.
Yeah, I don't
I
know.
do know
I guess
that
I never really. Fred Rogers was obviously came from some. He came from. He was like, wasn't he like a pastor of some kind?
he was an ordained Presbyterian minister.
I mean, God, he. I shouldn't say. He certainly. I shouldn't take no Lord's name in vain. He certainly looks like he's a Presbyterian pastor. I mean, he's got the either that or a doctor. He has the whole.
I think he also had a PhD or something.
Well, I mean, I'm a PhD in theology, but the whole professionalism carried over from the 1950s he has to a T. Yeah, there certainly is a video about that, but I'm not exactly so sure what the progressive mainstream wants us to think about these icons like Fred Rogers.
I think it's like I don't I don't I'm not sure either, but I think at least in a way it's like they're safe. Like there isn't a big association with them and anything like racist or sexist. Like I know like Jim Henson and Bob Ross kind of like epitomize being hippies a little bit, but I mean the thing is like they're just sort of so neutral, even though I think to an extent their behavior uh maybe it's because they don't want to have to conflate civility with an earlier age, because that would have to be them admitting there actually was something better to be cherished, in the 1950s.
That's the danger. That's why it's very risky for them to pick up these characters and start parading them around as icons of a long lost civility. They can't do that too long before people start asking uncomfortable and scary questions about the cathedral itself. And so I imagine they're doing this in order to get nostalgia bucks from Xers and boomers. And they're going to drop the act, and I think they're going to transition to everything was shit before the 90s, just as in the 2000s was everything was shit before the 80s.
Mm-hmm.
There's always sort of a receding timeline behind when things became reasonably bearable in the leftist imagination. And as more interest groups come into the coalition, that timeline keeps on going further and further into the future. So I think that they're going to have to drop that and find something wrong with it at some point. But who knows? Let's go on. So for $2, Lake says Daytona shooter confirmed leftist and actual Satanist. Well, I don't know. Can we confirm that?
They
I
had he had like a or some like
Is-
weird atheist patch on him, and apparently he was also an avid fan of Elizabeth Warren.
Yeah, I mean, this is the. Oh, by the way,
Oh, hello. How's it going? Who is this?
sorry to
It's
just
Buckley.
pop into a stream after having a few months taking a break from politics. But
No problem.
I mean, what a way to come back! What a time to come back! Am I right?
Well, yeah, but hold on. Just before anyone goes on here, can the chat tell me how the volume is? Am I a lot louder than Fritz and Buckley? I know I can't see this immediately, but just pop it in the chat if the volume is done. So what were you
I
saying,
know
Buckley?
within just
Oh yes, yes. I find it kind of interesting how both of these shooters, the El Paso one and the one in Idaho,
I
sorry,
oh Ohio.
Ohio. I'm sorry. What? Why am I?
Don't worry about it. Keep on going.
Stop smoking the weed.
Keep on going.
The both of the shooters had fairly left what we would call left wing views on economics, but the El Paso one was more of an what they would call an eco fascist, which is basically combining racialism with environmentalism and sort of
Racialism
critiques
and environmentalism. But 1 minute,
it's sort of
Geocon, could you up your volume a little bit? Everyone else seems to be fine. It's just you're low.
How's this? Is this good?
I didn't
maybe
hear
up
any
a bit
difference.
more.
You don't hear any? Oh well.
Okay,
I don't
well,
think I can-
maybe there's something we can do about it, but just see if you can maybe modulate that. Well, I don't know. Again, I feel a little bit hesitant
Dirty.
to. I know the left doesn't care about this, but I feel like the left shouldn't set the standards. I don't want to speculate about people's motivations for this before we have any information. We don't have a cathedral to cover our tracks at all, so that's going to be.
I would also refrain from people posting their manifestos on social media.
Well, that's going to happen. That's unfortunate.
I
but it's
meant
gonna
in
happen.
our own circles. Like I had to delete somebody who did it on my Discord.
That is very likely what killed the original Clear Trads Discord server and got me banned. That's why I'm not the distributist on. You do not see the distributist light up when it's obviously my voice coming out of this channel. But yeah, I don't know. Let's move on and see if we can't get some more productive questions. I appreciate that, Lake. It was a good insight, but I don't know. A more interesting question: $2 from Aging Boomer. Any thoughts on Soph being taken off of YouTube? Well, I'm sure the excuse was not that anything she said, but rather her age and the assumption that she's being put up to it by adults, because I suppose now all of a sudden we care about kids being used as mouthpieces for adults' political opinions.
Look, my 3-year-old told me about the entirety of Marxist economics and racial injustice.
So I don't know if you
Well.
guys watched Soph's last vid, but there's definitely some stuff in there that YouTube would ban you over. Also, hey
Can
guys,
you imply what that was?
like
without-
literally talking about killing people.
Well, that will do it.
Yeah. Like,
Well,
at
it
the
was,
very-
it was
at the very
sorry.
end, there's like this anti-pedophile rant that involves some pretty spicy language. So, to be fair to YouTube here, it was pretty on the nose.
Whew.
Yes, it was about. Oh, sorry, is my voice too loud? Is it a little too loud?
You're good.
It's
You're
actually
borderline
fine.
clipping.
Okay. Is this good?
That's
it's
fine.
better.
Go ahead.
Okay. Well, it was a little bit more about. She talked a little bit about homosexuality and its connection to that kind of thing.
Oh, that will do it. That will do it.
Yeah. So, yeah, she said a lot of slurs and stuff like that. And she was very. It was a. She says she's satire and stuff like that. That's I listened to some of her stuff, but she can be very, very edgy when she wants to be, it seems. But I just wanted to hop in. I'm sorry, I don't want to take up too much time. I just want to add something, Distributist.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you guys follow Owen Benjamin at all.
Vaguely. I mean, I'm aware of his existence, but
Well, I mean,
I don't really
I don't-
follow him, you know.
I don't really. I watch him from time to time. He can be entertaining. He is a former comedian and stuff like that. But I think he was. I listened to one of his live streams. I think it was a couple days ago, and he talks about how like the media and kind of how like stress and kind of like using this. He can be a bit nut. He can be like an Alex Jones where he talks a lot about the kind of overarching kind of.
Didn't he like beat his dog?
I don't think I don't follow him
I've never heard
that
that.
closely. I don't follow him that closely.
I just saw a video where he like was aggressively pushing his dog away. I think it may have been overblown, but
He may like I don't know that, but what he was talking about was basically like how the media controls people using stress and stuff like that and connects it to like kind of the crazy kind of like globalist kind of like conspiracy, like an Alex Jones type, which people like whatever people could believe about that. But I think it's important, like this kind of distributors, you talk about how you're afraid of like getting your Discord banned because of these shootings and stuff like that.
No, I already got my Discord banned
Well,
because of these shootings and stuff like that. I was there's a reason why I'm not named the distributist here.
Yeah. Well, it's more of the since the cathedral can use like the media as part of the cathedral, it will use these events to frighten those who are trying to build something, to not sticking their head up too much, not engaging too much, or not or just quit now. And you see that a lot with a lot of right-wing figures just quitting or just not doing what they're doing.
Well,
anymore.
Well, I think that's certainly true. The thing with most right-wingers quitting is because of the exhaustion factor. It's not you can't do this for a living.
Mm-hmm.
And because of that, and it's not like if I was just working and just doing YouTube, I could probably sustain this channel indefinitely without any hiatus, but obviously that's not going to be the case. But even if I was doing this with just work, the fact is that constantly getting taken down, constantly worrying about getting doxxed, kind of living a double life, it starts grating on your psyche quite significantly. And I don't think many people can sustain it for very long, or it takes a certain type of person to sustain it for very long. And that's been sort of the most effective thing that has gone on, is the fact that it's very exhausting to be a right winger.
Yeah, I haven't even been doing this as long as you guys, and the mental toll on the double life is a lot of pressure. It can be very frustrating.
I would say that actually but this might be a tangent, but when he was talking, not Omegan, whatever, when you were talking about the stress, I was thinking actually more along the lines of the way the media, addresses these is that the constant reporting and all of this, it seems like the massive stress it's inflicting on society as a whole is just a great way of, I don't know, further demoralizing society in general.
Well, controlling them. It's control. That's what he.
Yeah,
well, that's what,
it's like they needed people to be. They want people to be panicked because then they'll listen to the, the approved solution, the pre-approved solutions.
Yeah.
Like one thing that I've noticed. So I gave up both YouTube and the media for Lent, the news for Lent. And I've been, my job is very, very stressful. But in general, I feel like I've been a lot less frustrated and a lot just mentally healthier since then. Because I really haven't resumed too much, at least of the media, listen to a lot less YouTube than probably all you guys lately.
I have to say, I am a little addicted to YouTube, but I gave up Twitter for Lent as well, and I never missed it. I didn't notice it at all. It's addictive while you do it, but there aren't any psychological withdrawal symptoms, at least for me. Maybe for someone like Millennial Woes, but
This is kind of funny, Distributus.
That was actually my experience with Twitter too. When I took off Twitter, I didn't use it at all.
You know what's so strange? Because at like 100 followers, you read your timeline. At 1,000 followers, or whatever Twitter calls them, you only check your notifications. And at 5,000, you just get on and start muting conversations. Because, and I'm sure at like 10,000, like you just don't even read your notifications.
This is kind of funny because this year is the first time I got on Twitter, and also I'm thinking of, I am writing some stuff and I'm gonna make a small blog, but I'm planning on getting in, throwing at least my little voice in the ring, and it's kind of interesting to me because I'm getting like more meat for the grinder. I'm going over the top with New Wave or whatever, like that.
Twitter is undistilled insanity, and if it completely imploded in on itself right now, humanity would be greatly benefited. The problem is that it's an amazing political weapon, and it's very, very hard for one side to unilaterally quit without being extremely disadvantaged in the political arena.
It's the MAD.
Yeah, exactly. And the problem is that nobody likes Twitter. I genuinely like making YouTube videos, but I don't genuinely. The only time I've ever liked Twitter is when I'm in the airport and my flight's delayed and I need to just like kill an hour. That's the only time Twitter has ever been something that's been remotely pleasant. Other than that, it's just been a headache and a slight addiction.
I have a theory that I'm sorry.
Okay, well, I was going to go on with the super chats, but because I need to get through a bunch of these. I'll read a few of them. So $5 from Sarquisha Janalnisha. Whoa, okay. I know that's a joke name, but don't expect me to pronounce it correctly. $5. Thoughts on Cloudflare dropping support for 8chan? Or rather, what do you think of the proper place of the internet is in relationship to society? And then also from £2, thank you for your contribution, from Forest Synthesis. What's your thoughts on gun rights? So I'll just answer the first one. I mean, I guess this was going to happen. 8chan was even more poisonous than 4chan. I don't know what to say. I don't know if society is going to. I know the line from the right is free speech über alles, internet below rights, but there are going to be people that impose lines in the sand. Because if your forum becomes a way for schizophrenics to validate their paranoid fantasies, people are going to shut that down. And if your political project is intimately linked to a forum where schizophrenics validate each other's paranoid fantasies, then you're going to get shut down. And I'm not so sure that's the hill any of us should die on.
I think it's a good thing, honestly. And my main point is that I think like we have a lot of people that gather in these forums, and it's I don't think it's healthy. For one thing, I think most people who are on it are constantly on the internet. This isn't just there are like a group of people who are constantly on the internet. This is where they congregate because it doesn't have that big of a filter. It doesn't enforce anything. But I look around and I see a lot of I hang around a lot of right-wing circles online, but I see a lot of people who are and over the summer, since I'm not in school, you go out to the world and you see just the world. And maybe this is just me because I'm not in your situation, Hound. I'm living in a fairly right-wing community of I homeschool Catholics and stuff like that.
Distributist.
Okay. Yeah, I'll call you Hound from now on.
This is on the Distributist channel. I'm speaking
okay, Hound.
Yeah, Headhound is
I'm not incognito.
I'll just call you Boomer. Okay,
you
Boomer.
actually just doxed his Discord name, so now they're gonna find him.
Yeah, they're gonna totally. Not that I care at all.
Headhound is just his is
Yeah,
good friend of
Hound.
Dave the Distributus.
No, Headhound
He's
is
a good friend.
Is his professional
Okay.
wrestler name.
Well, I think this for all like people talking about free speech and stuff like that, it's going to help at least. I think it's going to help at least people. Maybe I'm just saying. Maybe it will get people to go outside and interact with the world rather than just being on the internet.
Yeah,
But that's a hope of mine.
Yeah, I was gonna say that. I think the most what is it, clarifying thing I've seen on Twitter or anything about all this is something Distributist answered to. Is I can't remember who it was, but they basically said that one way to help prevent this is to actually help, is to create IRL Christian organizations that actually get these people to interact with other people on a regular basis and isn't demonizing them. And I think, yeah, if you can actually have an IRL alternative to 8chan, or in the sense of
What is an IRL alternative to 8chan?
I don't want to see that.
my
A
point-
glory
my-
hole at a gay nightclub? Like, what would that
The
even
gay disco.
look like?
Gay disco.
My point being is having an IRL, or having IRL communities for people like this to find and associate with, rather than having to become lone wolves on the internet.
Well,
Yeah.
the problem is, though, Fritz, and I agree with this sentiment, there's two issues here. The first issue is the fact that while all of these things like Twitter are psychologically poisonous, they are politically useful. The second one is, so there's that.
Well, I didn't
The
disagree
second-
with that.
What?
I haven't disagreed with that.
But the second thing is that real life communities are built around charismatic and self-starting people, and then they slowly begin to attract other people. Now, the people on 8chan are not the people that get immediately drawn into starter communities IRL. The problem with communities IRL right now is that they are not on board with some necessary political and philosophical revelations that are really only discussed in online circles, considering the nature of discourse, power, things that we talk about on this channel all the time. And so you have sort of this is what creates sort of this dual life. You go to work, you go to your organizations, you even go to your church meetings in some cases, and you perform the necessary liberal platitudes, and then you talk about the ideas you dare not speak the name of on the internet. And the eventual goal for left-wingers, they can just go into any generally blue area and get applauded for their ideas, unless they're anything to the right of Mao, they can do that. And sometimes even if they are to the left of Mao, if they're an anarchist or something like that. But right-wingers can't do this. And this is what creates the sort of disconcerting double life, where even someone like myself, who's naturally gregarious, I like organizations, I like meeting new people, I don't have a place that I can talk about any of this stuff. And so I kind of feel like there's a barrier between myself and anyone else who's talking about meaningful political change or just the insanity of our everyday world. Because, what do you want to talk about when you talk about to people in real life? It's like Cheers. You want to talk about the problems of the world and feel like you're all on the same side. But when you're in this sphere of sort of radical political concepts, at least if you're on the right, you can't talk about these things in the same way. It's strange.
Yeah, even if you can find conservative groups, they're not really friendly to reactionaries either.
I think this is eventually going to have to change, but I'm not so sure how it's going to change.
I think it will happen organically. There seems to be a lot of, I guess, behind the scenes conversations happening just among people across the world on Discord, and perhaps this will evolve in some kind of grassroots array at some point into like actual IRL groups. I don't know.
Turning Point USA.
Well, there's a way to go. Well, there's a way to go talk to people where you can go express the ideas that you have and concerns that you have without coming off as crazy. And you just need to go make sure that you're talking to the right person with the right tact. It's difficult to do, though.
That's kind of what I was going to say, is that typically I've found that if I can talk to even left-wing people about right-wing ideas given the appropriate context and the appropriate person. Obviously not everyone is going to be open to that sort of thing, but if usually one-on-one you can discuss certain ideas and get them sympathizing with some of what you have to say if you can find a common ground, and I've had success with that before.
Yeah. So, for example, like I mean, most of the people that I know that I'm to the right of center, but I can have very good conversations with them even if they are to the left, depending upon like what the topic is and how you frame it. I think that's kind of the important thing, and you need to make sure that you don't look threatening.
And I know I beat this point to death all the time, and I have an entire series dedicated to beating this point to death. But leftist outrage and emotional reaction are linked to the symbols of bad words and not to the meaning of bad words. So if you take an idea that everyone's freaking out over and you just translate it, through the magic of what, it becomes something that all of a sudden is something people can actually deal with in an intellectual manner. And so in that way, especially if you couch it in leftist language, you don't talk about scary ideas like state rights. You talk about subsidiarity. You talk about localism. Oftentimes you can come to some kind of agreement, but in some ways that's also very superficial too.
So you're talking Catholic theology. That's what you want. Talk to them using Catholic theology.
Well, I suppose it would depend on the audience, right?
Well,
Yeah,
I think.
have seen. Okay, go.
Okay, yeah. Go. You can go, Mr.
Well, it was
Giacon.
just that I was. I mean, when Dave started talking about about this kind of localist stuff, I start. I often get from. I think I think it's exactly correct when when he says it's all about using the right language, because the language because of how leftist discourse, it seems like to me that they have this Pavlovian reaction to certain words and sounds and symbols, so that if they so that if they come across a certain key phrase or a certain symbol,
Yeah.
then it really triggers something in their brain, and it
That's what
shuts.
all humans do. And this is what creates the phenomenon of the magical word, right? Because the magical word is a word where the word itself triggers the emotional response, not the actual meaning of it. So the word only signals bad person. It really has no meaning outside of that. Or it only signals good person, conversely. But that's a natural human phenomenon. We all lapse into that. But it creates sort of a situation where it can be politically abused, and you can game that, right? You can modify your language to become more acceptable and more amenable to persuasion by avoiding things like that.
Yeah, I've heard from some people on the some YouTubers who study popular culture, like Black Pilled. He talks a lot about how um, people in Hollywood use certain symbols and images in order to associate certain symbols with other certain symbols, and over time that and create these responses in people.
Yeah, I mean,
Um,
I mean, just so we're not treading water on these ideas. Yeah, these are all societies do this, right? The problem is that it's very off. Usually, the societies do this based on a morality that is generally agreed upon. So that in some ways, the media apparatus is enforcing the same belief system that parents are with their children. But I think what's causing the disconnect is that people thought Hollywood had some kind of common moral ground with them, but they really don't. And they're only now realizing that for about 30 years, this dissonance has been going on, where sort of progressive assumptions have been smuggled into media we've consumed. And I don't think anyone really intended for this to happen. I think this is just what naturally has happened when you have an elite that's morally disconnected from the population that they serve. So I'm going to just transition this to the other one really quickly. So Forward Synthesis says, what's your thoughts on gun rights? I'm for them, but I think the right needs to get past gun rights. I think it's the fetishization of guns has just been it's been an excuse for stunting of our imagination in other regards.
Yeah, I agree.
And I think that
Can I say something quite quick? I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
The thing about the gun rights and such, to me, it's kind of foolish because you look how big this nation is. Over 300 plus million people in countless different counties, states, cities, all these type of stuff. And you're going to do a federal thing to control guns or ban guns and such. I know a lot of people talk about Australia, but they're like, what, 24 million people? And all this, and people seem to forget that this country is huge, and there's a lot of people and different types of people. I mean, there's some, I know for a fact that people in the black community will not give up their gun. They won't give up their type. They say no, we don't want that stuff. So
yeah, and plenty of
Democrats too. So don't think that's not going to hurt that stuff from around the world. Saying it's going to be great, but I'm like, is it really though? You're giving more power to police officers and such like that, which is very fragile right now. I mean, there's people throwing water at police officers or whatever, and the next police officers are I saw stories of police officers just using handcuffing. You saw the story of it, like using handcuffing one person who was mentally ill, and that person died because they didn't let go and do that. So I'm like, do you really want to give more power to that type of structure?
I before we completely get into the weeds of police brutality and all this stuff, I these things are, to my mind, I just don't understand how these things intersect with national politics. I care deeply about police brutality in my community, but to me, it's always this fundamentally a local issue. I need to get through these super chats. I just need to keep on going, guys. So thanks for your input.
Sure.
I don't want to be too short with you, but just understand that there's a lot of voices here. So Keith Johnson for $5. How do you see it playing out if the Republican Party disappears? Do you see a stronger right-wing party replacing it? Or will it be like the milquetoast Tories?
Mm-hmm.
Well, the problem is not. I mean, the difficulty is that the political consciousness of this country is not able to support a stronger right party than the Republicans. So I think that I'm just saying there was a YouTuber called The Franklin who made a video called The Leftism We Have to Have. And there's just a certain amount of leftism that we're just going to have to experience in order to get to the other side, because we don't have the ability to practically support a strong right political party doing politics as we've conceptualized it right now. How would that possibly work given the demographic situation that we're going to undergo? I think see how it's going to... To me, the Republican Party or any mainstream right party is playing out a pantomime of a meta-political controversy that's already been determined in advance, and that's why no one takes it seriously.
I think the only way we'd see the Republicans disappear is if the whole power structure of the United States changed in some fundamental way. I guess you'd call it the Fifth Republic, as Moldbug might say. I mean, the Republican-Democrat system is kind of intrinsic to our current structure, so it's been that way
since the end of the Civil War.
Yeah, so some serious political change where the government is reconstituted would have to happen, I would think, before we even have something that could even be called a successor to the Republicans. Like, we're going to need a successor to the United States before we have someone succeeding Republicans.
Could the entire country just become like California, where it's just only Democrats?
Oh no,
I'm quite serious.
Well, I think no, right? Because we would dissolve at that point. There's no way
the country cannot go to California. Will not be, because one is like I said, there's a lot of people. You doubt this, but again, the black vote is slowly but surely leaving the Democratic Party. it is consolidating and such. I mean, heck, you look at the 2016 election, you look at the 2018, the gubernatorial races and such. But yeah, black people are not going. They're not going to start voting for the Dems anytime soon. If this stuff keep working, and if they don't,
I
there's a lot of
think
people.
to that,
So yeah,
to that, there's I know a lot of people, like, when the distribution, they like to talk about demographics and such.
I don't think I want to
that,
cut in here. I don't think you. I think you can disagree that the United States is going to become like California, but I don't think that thought deserves to be laughed off as unserious. That is what a lot of very, very serious and high-paid demographic analysts that are working for the Democratic Party are planning on, and they're betting money on it. So,
and they will lose.
You have to argue against smart people placing $1 million bets on that possibility. They could be wrong, but
it's
not
going to happen
laughable.
to Texas, and when it happens to Texas in 10 years, the Republicans will not be able to win another national election.
Yeah, it's going to happen inevitably, unless
and states with nuclear weapons aren't just going to be able to walk off and become their own countries. Like,
yeah,
no.
Yeah, they're not.
I've been thinking about this, just because, to me it seems like the Republican Party is simply the Democratic Party of 20 years ago. It's not really as if they're two really distinct different parties. And like I've been thinking about like these, essentially like these, like what is the possible outcomes in the future? And like I thought about the idea of just having a Democratic Party that essentially overdominates politics, with the Republicans essentially as a bunch of pawns, just kind of used to be like a target,
being the outer party to the Democrats' inner party.
Yes,
to borrow
exactly.
an analogy from Orwell, which I'm borrowing from Molebug. But go ahead.
My thing is, my question is, at some point, the Democrats, can the Democrats sustain that, or would they fracture at some point? Because I generally think that the Democratic Party, as it stands, the reason why they're together is because there's
a fracture. But that's the whole point.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
The whole idea. So right now, the problem is not simply that we're dissidents. That would be one thing. We're dissidents that actually, if people, we are in a very strange position here, guys. And I think that this is it's almost historically unique. We're a dissident faction that if everyone were, and I know this sounds incredibly condescending, but bear with me, if everyone were properly aware of how power relations work and how power actually exchanged hands in this country, we are a distant faction that would comprise 45%, at least 25% of this country's population. That's what's represented by the opinions that generally circulate on this channel. Now, if that were the case, if we were just a 25-35% distant faction that was attempting to get some reasonable safeguards around our community to make sure that we're not, pardon my French, but fucked with too hard, then that would be something that in any realistic political scenario would be very easy to accommodate. But the problem was that we're just not any old distant faction that represents 25-35% of the population. We're the distant faction that represents 25-35% of the population that the reigning political class likes blaming every single problem in the world, historical or present, on. And because of that, the unity of the Democratic coalition can constantly be shored up by essentially using the 25-35% dissident right faction of this country as the scapegoat. They can blame all their problems on Republicans or racism or white privilege, and then use that as a reason why they need to be brought in and given even larger powers to expunge this demon. So the difficulty, the desire is that if the distant faction becomes politically invisible, new political realities and rivalries will have to be invented that cannot be, where this scapegoat cannot be used as a boogeyman. And then you'll have two political factions that might actually negotiate with our particular dissident branch, which would bring the 25-35 to 45% of the population that aligns with us into a much, much better tactical situation than we currently occupy. Thoughts?
The
Yeah,
problem
Dave,
see,
I have.
oh,
Oh,
One at a time,
I'll go.
guys.
I'm gonna go. I'm just gonna give a little, one little bit, and then I'll get off. I need to get to bed. But I think that was right on the money. I think that this expresses one thing. Just before I allow everyone, I think everyone should just build communities, like in the sense that build the personal connections that you have with people, and try not to get too stressed out over what's going on, especially if it's not happening in your own community. And I think Dave has and by doing that I mean build families, build those kind of close relationships where you can have these kind of conversations about right, left, and these ideas without being like called on Twitter or getting
Sean.
doxxed or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah.
That is a tall. I agree, but that is a tall order, and it's something that can't be the end of a conversation online. That's all I'm going to say. The problem is I appreciate the contribution. You're absolutely 100% right about that. And I know you have to go now, so unfortunately, it's going to have to be the end of your conversation.
No, I can stay for if you
sure. But this is the thing. Like, I am pro that sentiment as long as it's the beginning of a conversation. I am absolutely against that sentiment if it's the end of a conversation. I don't want to have. I'm so tired of like the priest going like, well, herder, build your tight knit communities. I don't know how you're gonna do it. Just do it. Like, get off the internet and build your tight knit communities. Well, let's see. Off the internet, I have no like that sentiment I just expressed that it seemed like a lot of people agreed with. I couldn't say that sentiment to a single group of people in my community that I ordinarily operate around without them looking at me like I was insane.
Yeah, it's impossible.
So the thing is that like there has to be a way to bridge the conversations, which I don't think are even particularly controversial, that we're having online, which are peaceful, which are respectful, with the realities we have in our actual communities, that we exist in, the lives that we live. If we can bridge that gap, I think we have a very good path forward.
You see, Dave, the thing, I think the reason why we have such different views, or at least I have my perspective, is that I live in a community that has this kind of base.
Mm-hmm.
I live in a kind of tight-knit community where you live in this liberal area, a little hellhole. I don't mind if I say that to you, where you live. And maybe that's just me because I haven't gone to any big. I never lived in a big city before. I've lived mostly in suburbs, smaller areas. So
I live in an agricultural community. It's just an agricultural community in the shadow of Silicon Valley.
Yeah. So it's more of, for me, I haven't had that experience yet. And so it's kind of like, for me, that's how like, I haven't experienced like being like, even the college I'm going to currently is not very, very left wing.
Okay, but
surprising.
Sure. But yes, here's why, even for red state Americans, this can't be the end of the conversation. I'm just sort of fundamentally allergic to platitudes I've heard for 15 years, and build your own community pilgrim has been a platitude that I've literally heard for 15 years.
Yeah.
And I'm outing myself as a 30-year-old boomer because I am a 30-year-old boomer, although I'm over 30. I'm a boomer. I'm a in his 30s boomer. I've heard that platitude for 15 years.
Yeah.
So if I've heard this platitude for 15 years and I'm sitting in America,
it gets tired.
Why aren't, if this is something that you can just do in right-wing communities, then why hasn't someone just done it in right-wing communities?
It's easier to talk than actually do things.
No, I'm not saying that we couldn't do it. I'm just saying that, like,
but you know what I'm saying? It's actions, man. It's harder to do in the real world because, finding people, that sort of stuff. And
even if you do it, though, you're still just crushed under the thumb of progressivism. That's the thing, though.
Oh, yeah. And the worst thing about the whole progressivism, when you talked about this, they think Hollywood and all this stuff, making movies, all this stuff is helping them out. Like, everything's great, all this stuff. But when you look at the reality is a lot of people are not in that whole progressive wave and such. It's not. And that's going to come to a head. And more often, and when that happens, it's going to fracture that type of base. And what it does they're gonna have a very rude awakening. And
I'm not really seeing that though.
well, for example, a lot of people, millennials, people who are younger and such, they, are not. They don't really like LGBT. They have they're at odds with them. They don't think that that sort of thing. They
Oh,
are.
Maybe
They're
I
Zoomers
mean,
are.
I don't really.
Millennials are
Well,
pro
if
LGBT.
these people, well, if these people don't have any kind of power or organization,
Oh yeah,
then
they
they
don't. They
don't.
don't. Yeah.
Then their opinion is basically means nothing because they'll be, if they don't go along with the program, they'll just be crushed. And I don't think that we even. I think I'm actually less optimistic than Dave is. Actually, I don't think we even represent 10% of the population in
You
terms
mean
of our
people who
opinion.
understand the ideas, but people who are aligned to them and don't really know it is what I was kind of going for.
Yeah, yeah, that's what I'm saying. I don't think that we represent even 10% of the population. Even
Uh,
if they knew everything, they would still be against us.
I'm not so sure, but even at 10%, the problem is not that we're a minority. The problem is that we're a minority that people in power not only don't negotiate with, but can't negotiate with. Otherwise, their coalition will fracture. The second that the whatever you want to call it, the cathedral, the mainstream, the progressive consensus, the second it negotiates with us, it eliminates a villain that they essentially need to keep their coalition together and operating. And that's the position that I absolutely don't want to be in. And the one that I think that we have an interest in subverting. But was someone else going to say something? I don't want to
Yes,
be doomers. I don't want to be like we can't do it. But go ahead.
No.
I was going to say that what I was concerned about is that even if this current group stops being the enemy, another group that we end up overlapping with will end up being the enemy. Because ultimately, I think the problem is that progressivism is struggling against Christianity until Christianity doesn't exist, and I don't see Christianity not existing for quite a while. So I think that whatever group they move to, it'll still be targeting us essentially.
I just don't think it's that simple. I don't
No.
think it's that simple because there aren't just two. Maybe in some kind of cosmic sense, there's only good and evil, but there aren't just two forces in the world. If, for instance, Republicans became less visible, the left would expand its power suddenly, and we would run into, say, China, or would run into separatists of a separatist POCs or nationalist POCs, right? I hate that word. It sounds derogatory, but that's what they say, or that's what the left. I should say. Separatist non-Europeans or nationalist non-Europeans, and then they would kick up. Then to get the resources that they're contesting, another political eruption would happen, and that would be a time to sort of reignite the flame, and because at that point, certain elements of the cathedral will be in a position where they want to negotiate. But if no one has anything immediate, I'd like to take some more super chats.
I would actually just say one short thing is that this is very short, but there is a form of Christianity, at least for now. The very, very watered down liberal Christianity is still very amenable and useful for the left.
That's because it is the left.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. It's nice. It's nice. It's bite.
My Episcopalian great aunt and uncle hippies are a testament to that.
Well, what I'm actually wondering about is if our goal is to not if our goal, assuming that you're correct, that if people started knowing more about us, they'd join us, and assuming that if the cathedral starts trying to negotiate with us, it'll start to crack up. How do we make it more difficult to turn us into the scapegoats?
Because they're going to
I
be
think
fighting
Dave said it
against.
earlier.
They're going to be
No,
fighting
I
against
mean,
forces
no,
that can't possibly be confused with us, like China.
no. I mean,
Yeah.
how do we make it so that we can't be turned into the scapegoats as easily?
Dave talked about it earlier when he talked about the symbols being the enemy and not the language itself. I think just
Yeah,
if you could,
there's a lot of ways to do
avoid-
this, and I think that's I appreciate the question's very well posed, Buckley, but it's too big for us to answer without going like there's so many different ways. But like the symbolism that you mentioned there is a good way. I have to read another super chat here.
All right.
$5 for only betas. Thanks a lot, though, Buckley. Good question. Or should I call you Geocon? I don't know.
You can call
$5
me
for only betas have YouTube accounts. 69. Thank you for your contribution. Are some white nationalists returning to violence because Trump promises on immigration have clearly fallen through? Well, I don't want to say that that's happening. That's certainly the sentiment you hear from a lot of sectors inside the, what should I call it? The movement formerly known as the alt-right. I feel like that sounds like Prince. But
and a lot less not, and they don't have any good songs there too. So,
yeah. Come on, I like St. Pepsi.
Yeah, go ahead.
But go ahead. I don't want to take that. I would say in a vague sense, yes. I will say, I guess I have to sort of acknowledge that there is a phenomenon of a right wing violence upswing in 2018. It seems that does appear to be. I don't want to say it's statistically recognizable, but I feel it's gone to the point where it might be. It's always easy to overestimate these things.
18 and 19, and when I see it,
there seems to be an actual phenomenon that we can measure.
Mm-hmm. I personally think that it's you could say it's
and I think probably it's the result.
Please don't interrupt. Go ahead.
Well, it's to me, it's I think more deeper than that. I think it's, to me, you have to look with their families and such, where they're raised, and seeing most of them, these shooters, they come from single parent households.
That's a good point.
And when single parent households, man, they are single parent households. They have a lot more violence in the home because that type of like punishment and such, and they think this is the only way to solve issues, or this is the only true way to get through this stuff, and they get all that hyped up. And
I see what you're saying. I think Stephen Molyneux would certainly agree with that. I've heard that theory before, and it's a good one. Fritz, do you have something to add too?
Yeah, I was just going to say is I think the problem is that, or I think one possible cause is the fact that a lot of people on the right do feel frustrated. The fact that Donald Trump isn't doing like that, even though they had a big political victory in 2016, it isn't translating into anything real being done. I feel like since there doesn't seem to be any real organizations that support people that want actual change, when it comes to mass immigration or illegal immigration, that they aren't represented. It seems like all that anger doesn't have anywhere to go. There's nowhere that they feel their grievances can be addressed. I think
and it's just, to me, like a bizarre effect of Barack Obama. The left is like they were disappointed. It led to more apathy in the left, but it seems like the right, they wanted something more. That sort of thing. They wanted that type, and if they don't get it, they see violence instead of apathy. And this is like my last thing before I go and such. So you'll lose your diversity here, Dave. I'm sorry, but
no, it's no problem.
But yeah, it's this the ideas of what's going on with these people who are these mass shooters. You can say white supremacy, you can say all that, but again, it has to be look at what they're being raised, what they're doing, what they have been grow up in, the homes they are at. Because if you don't look at that type of situation and you say white supremacy and all this stuff, which can be valid, but if you don't know what's going on in these homes, you don't know what's going on with they're getting, not just single parent households, but also medications, that sort of thing. I mean, it means nothing.
There's a lot of stuff there. All
right, I'll talk to y'all later.
Okay,
have a great day, man. I mean, great evening, or wherever people are watching right now.
Well, thank you so much for stopping by. Anyway, I think I want to respect. There's lots of different reasons for this. I don't want to speculate about this shooter's motives, but if there is a way to assuredly destroy any kind of right-wing movement, the persistence of right-wing people wielding violence against innocents will certainly do that. And nothing, I hate to say it, like nothing I can do can possibly stop that. No ideas we can have can stop that. And I feel like in some sense you're at the mercy of schizophrenics, but I don't know what to say. We'll have to find some way of channeling this anger and dealing with people who are coming out of these broken homes in a way that's not going to destroy any type of hope for an alternative to progressive liberalism. I'm going to keep on going because we spent a long time on that question. For $5, Kenton Wasum, why is Christianity fundamentally attributed as causing the Dark Ages? Well, it's chronologically the age of Christianity took place broadly at the end of the Roman Empire. But as for the common narrative about Christianity destroying the wisdom of the ancients, it's a product of Protestant propaganda from the early Enlightenment. I don't want to mince words, but that's kind of what caused it.
Because there needed to be some way to answer the historical conundrum of, okay, well, we have all this new understanding of Christianity. So what happened in the past 1,000 years? Oh, well, these evil Catholics took over and ruined everything, and they were just wrong.
Yeah, and there was a meme, and I just to add on to that, Fritz, before there was a meme that I kind of was circulating around the internet that kind of embodied the historical problem, where it shows like the Mormon picture of Captain Moroni or whatever burying the tablets that Joseph Smith would find, and it redubs it. Pastor Jim Smith buries the true King James Bible before being intercepted by the forces of Roman Catholicism, circa 700 AD.
I love there's one where there's a pro-Catholic version where it says like who started your church, and it shows different denominations. Somebody made a fake Protestant version where instead it shows who founded the Catholic Church, Constantine and Satan, and Pastor Jim Bob's Bible Church started in 33 AD. But I also love of course, there's the biggest, you pointed this out in your video response to Dark Matter, that this seems to be the problem in atheist and Muslim circles is the Byzantine Empire. What's that? That never existed. There was no Christian empire that preserved the ancients for 1,000 years. What are you talking about?
The difficulty is that oftentimes Muslims and atheists love piggybacking off and they weren't really all Protestants, because oftentimes these were these sort of myths about the Dark Ages, or not. It's not the Dark Ages was a myth. It's just mischaracterized. These mischaracterizations of the Dark Age were promoted by atheists pretending to be Protestants of a certain variety.
What I think a lot of it is, we live in a world where we want to believe that we're on the cutting edge. And I think everyone, to some degree or another, believes that. And that's one of the reasons for the rise of progressivism today. But, for you to be up on top of the world, and to be on the cutting edge, so to speak, you have to have come from, some time where you weren't. And so, when you go take a lot of people in the Renaissance, where they're identifying, and trying to recapture the glory of the Roman Empire. And you have to explain, okay, why are we not Roman? Given that we believe this to be, the superior form of artistic virtue and value, you need to go explain that away in somehow. And the same thing with Protestantism, the same thing with modern atheism. We kind of, I kind of almost believe it's this elevation of the Roman Empire to a degree where, people don't really understand it very well, but we'd like to envision it as this perfect entity that we're trying to reclaim. And this is really what drove these narratives about the Dark Ages, despite the fact that there really wasn't very much of a difference between the late Roman Empire and the early, late antiquity.
Yeah, and don't forget, if it wasn't for the golden age of Islam, who preserved all the wonders of the Roman Empire, have you ever seen that when a atheist or a liberal will say that, yes, Catholic Europe was this unenlightened backwater, while the Islamic world was a mecca of enlightened learning?
Did you just call the Islamic world a mecca of something?
No pun intended.
Are you all not hearing?
But I have a.
Are you all not hearing?
just so we don't get too bogged down in this, I think everyone's sort of agreeing about the general layout of that question. £5 for forward synthesis. The left decides who's right wing. Being nationalist or unprogressive carries more weight than economics and other issues. It's a worldview thing. I don't know if that's really a question. Does anyone want to react to that?
I mean, like, I to a point, like, I mean, for the most part, I agree. You know, the real reason why there is a left and right wing is because the left wing really defines what the right wing, or they define themselves, and then they define the outgroup as the right wing, which is why, you know, you have libertarians and authoritarians and any other thing that essentially is not the common consensus on the left is declared as right wing.
It's essentially the Dinesh D'Souza tried this on the right. The only difference is that that Dinesh D'Souza has no institutional power, and it sort of exposes how ridiculous the whole idea is. Wherein he basically does the same thing of everybody that's not within my ideology is left wing, but the left essentially does the exact same thing. But because they're in control of the entire narrative, they're actually able to spin it a lot better and sell it as truth.
Something that Academic Agent's been saying lately that is pretty interesting and perhaps true is that there is no right wing, and it basically is just whatever isn't left wing. And that does seem to be more and more accurate as of late, since we have all of these sort of disparate groups roughly in alliance on the right, and everyone always argues who is or isn't on the right. It doesn't really seem like the right is very much of a coherent concept in of itself. It's more like just whatever is not left wing is right wing, basically, and the left decides what it is.
And you bizarrely had Gavin McInnes and the other sort of alt-right, I guess, saying that that's actually a good thing, that the diversity of opinion on the right, the fact that they can never agree on anything, is actually why they're better than the left.
Yeah, I think that's actually killing us.
Gavin McInnes is... I think I'm starting to finally realize why people despise him so much.
Yeah, I kind of got that when leftists threw his little anal antics in my face and asked me to explain.
The what?
I don't know if I really
maybe I don't want to know.
In polite company, but the guy has a penchant for doing things with small objects that I really can't explain. So, yeah, let's leave it there. So for $5, I think we beat that one to death because I largely agree with all of that stuff you said. So Thomas Cortese for New Zealand, $5, says, have you ever read Gene Wolfe? Fantastic writer and devout Catholic. Check out his Book of the New Sun if you haven't. I have checked it out. I haven't gotten through the entire series, though. I am fascinated by Gene Wolfe. I think I should really give him a reread because this is a piece of science fiction property that is really evocative, really interesting philosophically, and is very amenable to our reactionary point of view. And more importantly, it's not currently a piece of corporate IP, which means that if we wanted to make fanfic in games set in that universe, we totally could. Well, I know with the permission of Gene Wolfe, of course, but it doesn't take that much. It seems like it would be possible
He's dead.
To build.
He died a few months ago.
Oh, I know, but that does not mean his IP is.
Okay.
Primary rule, rule number 1 of American insane IP law: don't assume because the artist is dead that you can get away with using their stuff. But I have reason to believe that the estate might have an open policy towards the use of his images and ideas, or they're not going to enforce a world that's inspired by his sci-fi. So, you know, I don't know. Insofar as you don't want to start from square one, and you have some kind of game or comic idea, or just want to write dark science fiction inside a certain world, that might be why go to Star Wars, right? Why not go to a science fiction author like Gene Wolfe is all I want to say. So I don't know. Does anyone else have anything to say about Gene Wolfe and his science fiction?
I'm not familiar.
I just heard about it. I'm excited to read it.
I remember wanting to try and read about it, but I've heard some. I mean, I think I do have his book somewhere, but I forgot where I put it.
Well, if you haven't read it, that's fine. But aside from the drama books, right? For those of you who haven't read, which seems like it's everyone in this chat. It is a very good, I hesitate to call it post-apocalyptic. What Gene Wolfe was trying to do was to create a story from a science fiction world that was so far in time advanced from our own that we really don't have good language to express the things that are going on.
Oh.
We understand, and so the thing is that we're told about, we're told about objects and animals that are equivalent to something that's like a horse, and the author tells us that they are like horses, but they're not. And so it creates kind of like, what it kind of creates is he's trying to tell an eternal story that's outside our reference point in history, which I think is a very interesting idea. And the idea also is that there are eternal cycles of history. And so that we should have a reference point for understanding these stories, even though we can't really pinpoint in our mind any given object that might exist in that universe. And so for that reason, it's kind of interesting. But I'll move on since no one else has read it.
I mean, well, I was going to say, there was the book I have by Gene Wolfe is called The Island of Dr. Death and Other Stories and Other Stories. And it's a collection of short stories written by him, and he's got a sort of an ironic sense of humor, because one of the short stories in the book is called The Island of Dr. Death and Other Short Stories.
Mm.
That's the name of an actual story, and the other book, one of the other stories is called The Death of Dr. Island, and another story in there is called The Doctor of Death Island.
Yeah, that sounds very much like the sort of self-referential humor by Gene Wolfe. But I haven't read that one, but I also would recommend Stanislaw Lem for people who like sort of bending self-referential science fiction like that. But let's go on to the next question, since we're talking about an author that no one other than me has read.
Okay.
So for $2, Monsieur Bojangles says, Dave, what do you think? Well, no, I'm sorry. For $2, Cicero Chickpea says, what's an example of a woke movie creating repressed monsters? I think this is in reference to sort of the tweet storm I gave off yesterday about catching subtle reactionary themes inside movies that were being created by people who are supposedly in their public life progressive. Now, there's countless examples of this, but I'll tell you the one that I saw most recently that inspired me to make that tweet storm. And that was the movie Midsommar, that just left theaters, or might still be in theaters if you're in a big city. And so that movie, it's basically like a horror movie. And if you've seen previews for it, you'll immediately think of a previous horror movie called The Wicker Man. And I don't want to give out spoilers, but it's a little bit too much like The Wicker Man for my taste. The movie was
the Nicolas Cage one or the 1970s one.
Well, since I'm referring to the plot, both of them.
Okay.
But the cinematography is wonderful. The direction is fine. Characters are a little bit okay. With the exception of one, the characters are a little bit weak. As a horror movie, though, it doesn't have a lot of power. However, as a reactionary psychological metaphor, it has incredible power. And so if you don't take the movie at face value, but instead see it as a psychological journey the protagonist is going on, you can read a very, very reactionary psychological lesson in which you learn that individualism is fundamentally fake and that collectivism is fundamentally something that's profound and deep and is the end of a psychological hero's journey, even if the outward product of collectivism is horrifying. And I don't know if this is the story that the person wanted to tell inside Midsommar. It seemed like he just wanted to do a rehash of Wicker Man with better cinematography. I know I'm spoiling it, but come on. Everyone's seen the preview and thought Wicker Man, right? But I think he seemed to be telling a more profound story. then he even might have been aware that he was telling for a few reasons. But I don't know. Does anyone seen that movie, Midsummer? Or anyone want to talk about progressive movies secretly containing woke messages that the authors aren't aware of? Or containing reactionary messages the authors aren't aware of, I should say.
So maybe it contains accidental reactionary messages because it copied The Wicker Man, and The Wicker Man was a reactionary work.
Pardon me, what was that, Buckley?
I said maybe it accidentally contains reactionary messages because it was basically a copy paste of The Wicker Man, and The Wicker Man.
No. The reactionary message I was pointing out was not present in The Wicker Man.
The reactionary message what?
The reactionary message that the reactionary way of interpreting Midsummer, that theme was not present in Wicker Man. Although Wicker Man had its own reactionary concepts inside of it, they were entirely different than the one that I kind of caught wafting off perhaps unintentional psychological things that were being explored in Midsummer. To save this conversation from complete vagary, let's move off of Midsummer. But because otherwise it's gonna be like innuendo over like a movie that probably no one's seen. But
I actually find that a lot of anime has reactionary tendencies in it, probably because it comes from like anime still has a lot of Japanese tradition embedded in it, which is something that Western media lacks.
I think it's very highly variant on which anime, because I've seen a lot.
Absolutely.
I've seen a lot that are actually. It's bizarre. Like I was comparing. There's one called Labyrinth of Magic, which is sort of like trying to make this entire like Lord of the Rings scale world out of sort of a adaptation of like the 1001 Arabian Nights, but literally they say we're going to turn this one monarchy, this one kingdom that's doing really bad and the king is all corrupt and everything, and it's now going to be a democratic republic. And yet and that's supposed to be like in this old fantasy world. Yeah, I'll watch my favorite anime of all time, Eden of the East, is set in the modern age, and it basically massively criticizes the boomer generation for sort of ruining the lives of the younger generation, and it essentially inadvertently advertises monarchy as there needs to be some sort of central figure to help lead society, rather than just saying everybody should just decide things on their own.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, when we're talking about anime with reactionary themes, we can't forget Perfect Blue, which even though like people attribute it as a postmodern meta left-wing decadent critique, it very much examines, it and this is something I wanted to point out, is that in the kind of right wing sphere, people are either weebs or they either despise anime, but they forget that anime is a medium and is also capable of self-examination. Perfect Blue examines, the how to put it, the meta capitalism of the East, and the problems of sexual itemization.
Paprika too, right?
I think so.
Because I'm not so sure that those two movies were very similar.
I believe it was.
What was the other movie?
Well, Distributors.
Okay.
Well, Dave, what was your final diagnosis of anime? I know you did that live stream with Templar. Templar?
Well, Argent. I did a live stream with Argent, but I don't think we came to any conclusions about.
Nor did you when you talked to me about it.
Well, I mean, I didn't do a video on anime. I think.
Oh God.
The problem is
Lord, sorry.
Oh,
is it just? Crap. The thing is I don't.
Well,
I think it's a perfect fit for the Trad Codex series, because I was really into anime when I was a lot younger, when I was a teenager, and I'm trying to sort of find out the reasons why it sort of resonated with me a lot then, and what kind of went wrong, and what, because the medium has certain qualities to it that seem to be more or less essential, and has got certain problems with it that seem to reoccur again and again and again and again. So I think it's interesting.
Well,
It's definitely
there's
interesting.
Just
there's
a
You strike
weird,
me as a Full
suspicious
Metal Alchemist
feeling.
kind of guy.
oh well, I was
One at a time.
Guys, yeah, please.
Okay, did you want to go first? Who was talking?
Go ahead, Buck. You're talking now. Go ahead.
All right. Well, I was just going to mention that there was this one. I do, although I don't watch as much anime as I used to. I do watch some anime YouTubers from time to time because they have. Some of them do fascinate me as sort of a case study of what an anime fan looks like from the outside. And probably one of my favorite YouTubers in that regard is this guy named Digibro, who is
Oh
who is
no.
probably who I consider to be well, he's kind. I think he's not the most pleasant person based on his
Oh wow.
online. And this is
He sounded like a saint to me.
oh no, he's kind of a degenerate, but
He's a lonely con. isn't he?
Digibro, a degenerate? No.
He's actually
No,
married,
come on.
or is it
Well, he is
dating?
married,
Okay, well,
but
whatever.
he-
But so
he's like-
go complete your
well,
point.
the thing
Buckley.
is, he does make several videos examining why he likes the medium and where he wants the medium to go. And I think there was one video that I sent to you on a Twitter DM.
Okay, but
that explains why he likes anime. That
sure.
I think
Maybe I'll
describes a lot of people.
examine it. But here's the thing, and I don't want to bring up me being old again, but it seems to come up a lot in this particular conversation. I'm less interested in where anime needs to go from where it is now. I'm more interested in where anime hasn't gone in the last 17 years. It has seemed to gone absolutely nowhere since the 90s. It didn't get more advanced in any way.
Well, there's
I think that's a
and-
little unfair. The animation
Is
is
it-
better. In
Okay,
many
well, I guess
cases.
I guess computers have gotten better.
Actually, I think you
But-
can
I
make
mean,
the argument that made it
if
worse.
It depends.
I mean, he does examine that topic a lot, and he's written video essays like "We Have Accepted Mediocrity."
I'll check it out, but the thing is that people were, and this is certainly going to be a topic of a video if I get around to making the anime video before the hiatus. The anime has been stagnant, like incredibly stagnant since the mid 90s. And no matter how many Westerners point this out, nobody has been able to either learn how to bring anime's charm into a thoroughly Western context or has managed to communicate what's so incredibly stale to people who make anime in the East. The one exception, I every now and again you see something that you're like, yes, they saw anime and they incorporated its lessons perfectly. For instance, Over the Garden Wall is something, I think even Fritz recommended that to me, but that's something that's one of the few things where I'm like, where I saw the medium and I said to myself, people who did that, they watched anime, they learned its lessons, and they didn't try to recreate it in a stupid way, and they actually fixed a lot of the problems with anime. And a few cliches notwithstanding, they created something that seemed
beautiful.
To be, it seemed to be timeless. Very timeless.
They created something, I think for me, sorry, I just have to bring this up because I really love Overalls. They created something that was completely and totally sincere.
But overall, that's the exception to the rule. What we see intruding into Western animation are the forms of anime that make it insufferable. The cutesy characters, the running and eating in weird ways, the winking at the camera. Maybe I actually can. I know Geocon brought this up. Maybe I actually can bring up Steven Universe, and that might make it interesting. If you bring up other things like Steven Universe and Over the Garden Wall, a video about anime could actually be interesting, and not just repeating critiques that have been done to death.
Well, I do think that one of the main problems, besides maybe on the surface level at least, for what a surface level explanation of why anime as an industry is stagnating is that for the past 10 years, there has been sort of this light novel obsession.
Yeah, I disagree
Basically,
with the tense of that verb. Is stagnating sounds like it's just occurring now. Has stagnated for 20 years would be a better, a more accurate description of the state of the art in anime. Or 50. Well, okay, I'll be generous. 15 years.
Well, if we, I mean, this has been going on since at least 2009. So, but what I see in there is some amateur author creates a web novel, and it gets, and then this web novel is taken up by a publisher and republished as a light novel, and then the light novel is then turned into a manga and anime. And the problem is all these web novels are basically fan fiction tier quality, but these anime studios can just out a ton of them every season, and there's this pattern of, well, we got to put out 20 something anime in one season, so you get a ton of manga adaptations and light novel adaptations put into anime.
Fair enough, and that's very insider. That's a good critique, but very insider baseball for the level of conversation we're having. I'm sure the process of making these things is contributing to the stagnation, but since this is a complete digression, I really need to move forward.
All right, sure.
So for $2, Monsieur Bojangle says, Dave, what do you think of Christopher Lasch? I feel like I've read something by his. I know, but I can't remember what I read of his. I know he wrote books about narcissism and about elites, but I have to confess not being well versed enough in his writings to really have an opinion. Anyone else want to comment on Christopher Lasch? I have a good impression of him. I just haven't gotten around to reading anything he's written. Sorry, Mr. Brown Jangles. I think we're out of luck on that. Thank you for your contribution. He's on my list. That's all I can say.
Well, yeah, Christopher Lasch is kind of interesting because he has a lot. He's fairly egalitarian, but at the same time, he's highly traditionalist.
Have you read any of his books?
I've skimmed through some of his works, and he seems to be the best way I can describe him is that he has an old left view of economics, like a worker labor union view of economics, combined with a very conservative traditionalist or even reactionary view of capitalism and modern politics in general.
Well, I can see why there is a sudden interest in him now. That's very interesting. I can understand that. But
he was around in the 50s and 60s making these kinds of critiques.
Yeah. So I know he's an older guy. I think he's not alive anymore, but he's an older guy. But I can see why he's suddenly appealing now. So I'll have to look more into him. Another super chat, $5 from Callum Blake. Hey Dave, we interacted on Twitter a few days ago about the dirtbag left. If it's at all relevant to the present discussion, I could answer questions. Oh, I love you two. I guess, am I following you on Twitter? Can you DM me and I'll let you into the chat? Okay. Maybe I can let you in. Yeah, okay. So give me a second, guys. I'll let anyone have any opinions on the dirtbag left while I'm doing this?
On the what left?
The dirtbag left, like Chapo, Trap House, Vouch. I don't know if Destiny qualifies, but basically it's a bunch of leftists that love being mean to people.
I don't think you mean
that group.
Okay, go on.
You mean like the sort of shit-eating grin post 2008 new atheist types?
No, I'm talking about a phenomenon that comes from 2015. But it's a phenomenon that's 2015. It's a bunch of like communists, and they're kind of like I want to say they're like the Daily Shoah, but for the left.
Oh, all right. I know the type you're talking about. So
Didn't
like
you
Trevor,
debate one of
Trevor
them?
Noah
Bausch is
impersonators.
well, El Chapo Trap House is the obvious example, and I'm not so sure how I get a better example than that, because when people say the dirtbag left, they usually mean the Chapo guys. It's an incredibly popular podcast from the left, but I'll move on in case if no one has anything to say about them.
I mean, what is there to say? It's the appearance of confidence. We don't really have any.
Well,
Like,
I think
the
the natural question for us to ask would be their relative longevity. Whether they're going to be a phenomenon going
I
forward, or
think it
whether they're a
depends
product of our current
upon.
time. What?
I think it depends upon what demographic you're trying to appeal to. They might appeal to.
Oh, I know what demographic. That's a non-trivial.
Yeah.
That's obvious what demographic the dirtbag left is trying to appeal to. White urbanites. That's it.
Yeah.
Like white, well-off urbanites that probably will be professional, but are like artists and live in places like Portland.
Are you familiar?
Antifa members are a member like these guys. Yeah, those. Are the
Dave, are you familiar with the Islamist wing of? I don't want to call them Islamist, but the Muslim wing of YouTube.
No.
There's two guys who do a similar routine, Muhammad Hijab and Ali Rizvi. What you might colloquially call the sort of Islamic tube, or that community over there, and they basically go around Britain. There's like a couple of videos of them confronting Tommy Robinson a couple of times, and their whole thing. It's actually pretty fucking cringy. I know Lauren Southern tried having a conversation with Ali Rizvi at one point, and it's the same thing, but their whole shtick is they go around and they just essentially do the sort of the shit-eating grin, I'm better than you from a Muslim perspective routine that these guys do, and they basically just be mean and dickheads.
God, I mean, I guess this is appealing to somebody.
Well, they do have an interesting demographic. I think Ali Rizvi's got about 250,000 guys who follow him. Muhammad Hijab's a little bit more dialectical, or dialectic.
Where? Like in this country, or is it all from the Muslim world?
I assume it's all Muslim. But I spoke to. I won't give his name, but he's been on TV a couple of times, and I met him at a political conference in D.C. And he tells me that these guys are that he follows these guys, and he's met them a couple of times, and essentially they're just knobheads. Like if you talk to who's Chank's, Chank's nephew. What's his name? Hassan.
No, I don't know his nephew.
Hassan Piker.
Hassan Piker.
That's his nephew.
Yeah, that's his nephew. Yeah, he's related to Chank.
No
like
way.
AIU, atheism was unstoppable. Shits on Hassan.
Oh my god, it's so
AIU,
incestuous.
AIU.
Wait, I'm
He's an idiot too. Is this?
Hassan Piker is unironically Cenk Uygur's nephew, and he's a communist. Like openly came out. Like he had a debate with Charlie Kirk, and where he just
Charlie
openly
Kirk say, "Well, they're the real leftists."
Yeah,
Donald Trump is for gay marriage. Isn't that conservative?
I've met Charlie Kirk, and look, I think there's issues with Charlie. I think I know what the issues with Charlie is. I think he just needs to go join.
AIU is related to Cenk?
No, AIU is not related to Cenk.
Okay, please,
I'm confused.
Guys, let's keep focused here, okay? If you can't follow the conversation, that's crazy, and that makes me despair over life.
Hassan Piker is Cenk Uygur's nephew, I believe. Cenk Uygur is his uncle. So,
I've never heard of this guy. What is he?
Like, he's basically a left tuber.
If you guys like, you can just go watch some of his stuff. He's got a YouTube channel and everything. But case in point is like, this is basically he's appealing to a very narrow demographic. They do the similar thing over on sort of Muslim tube, and when you actually talk to these people in person, my whole point is that they're basically knobheads. They don't perform well in an actual debate setting. So for Vaush, the only thing that he can do is he just gets on with you, and he's just racist. Oh, you must like pedophiles because
then in the next stream he goes on about how it's all right to genocide third worlders because they're no nationalists.
Well, you cut out there.
Bausch
and another stream, he right after mine, he goes on the stream and says it's all right to genocide third worlders because they're ethno-nationalists.
So
right? And
So
this is yeah, I know the type. I can't believe these people are popular, but
this is the interesting point. Is one of the interesting things that when I was talking to this particular individual, he brought up the fact that one of the interesting things that's going on in the Muslim community, it's sort of like I don't know how it's degeneration of Islamic philosophy. So, for example, these guys are street preachers. When Muhammad Hijab or Ali Rizvi go out and they talk and they essentially do their shit-eating cosmopolitan shtick to try and bring people to the faith, they don't come with good arguments because they're not philosophically trained. But if you go back to the 90s and you watch like the debates between members of Hizb ut-Tahrir, or you watch the debates between, and they would like go out and actually debate philosophy with Catholics. Those debates are of a much higher caliber, and it's like the sort of what's his name, Sam Harris's friend, the guy who always brings on.
I don't know, but I just gonna say this here. I hate street preachers.
I'm just making
Jesus explicitly say you shouldn't do it?
I'm just making this sort of.
I'm not so sure about that because in some sense he did. Oh, hey, Dominic L. So you're the person who gave the original tweet about the dirtbag left. Do you have anything else to add? We were just talking about it before you came in.
All right, can you give me like a quick like recap, because I was trying to figure out my mic while you guys were talking about that.
It's a phenomenon. Apparently, there's an Islamic version. I don't know why people like it, but it's incredibly popular among white urbanites these days, and it's probably not going anywhere, to be quite honest. But yeah, that's all I got.
Well, yeah, I brought that up because I also remember our initial Twitter interchange when you were asking, it's like, okay, what about this could possibly convert anyone, or what about this could draw someone who is undecided or draw someone who is right wing? And I have some answers. I have some answers when it comes to that. I need to fill the
chat in about our chat. So before you answer anything, so this was the original question. I was commenting on Thought Slime's tweet, and Thought Slime said the dirtbag left was the real conversion powerhouse that took people away from reactionary politics, and I said, who the hell watches Vaush or El Chapo Trap House, hears them call you a piece of shit, and goes like, sign me up. I'm now part of the left. Apparently somebody. Is that what you're seeing, Dominic?
No, not necessarily a conversion, but I think this is sort of a sword that cuts both ways, because if you look at forums like Stupid ID Poll on Reddit, which is full of like Angela Nagel type leftists, which is in a similar sphere, there's always this, because there's a lot of reactionaries. Like, as long as you're open about it, you might get some sneering, but like reactionaries can find points of contact here, and it's very, very alarming to like ContraPoint style leftists. That's like very alarming to them. In fact, they're like those type of leftists, like rad libs, they're more worried about stupid dirtbag leftists turning reactionary than the other way around, in my experience.
I mean, that would be amazing. That would be, to me, that would be a function of the cathedral cracking, when dirtbag leftists actually join the right. I don't think that's absolute. I don't think that's impossible. I see that happening.
I don't know if it's a matter of joining, or if it's a matter of like, okay, we have some common ground here. Like, something I see on Stupid ID Poll forums is they are very much against the Silicon Valley censorship, even though they don't particularly shed any tears for people who are against gay marriage or whatever getting banned. They are more concerned about like the power of these companies than they are like, you know, some far right guy without much of an audience triggering someone. Like, so there is this point of contact here, and this really upsets like the ContraPoint style leftists. Is like, if you want to give an example, so they're willing to have these political alliances, so to speak, and basically anyone who's really into the social justice stuff, who really emphasize that, thinks that, okay, this is just fascism brooding, you know, like economic leftism, social conservatism.
Okay. So I'll give a reaction to that from my point of view. And I know, Charlemagne, I saw you were kind of coming in there. My take on this is that eventually the dirtbag left and the ContraPoint style left are going to have to break. mostly along the same lines as you saw the conflict occur between Vaush and Thoughtslime 2 weeks ago or last week. I can't even remember when it was. But eventually the break will happen. But in the meantime, I thoroughly want to convert people like Angela Nagel. I don't particularly want to have more people like Vaush in this movement, in any kind of right-wing coalition, because they're going to be a liability. And without the support of mainstream institutions and the fact that they're marginally acceptable inside circles within blue areas, they really don't have much of a pull, and they're not very likable people. So if it happens, great, but I don't exactly want to have Vouch over for a beer or really want to have anything to do with the El Chapo guys. So, I don't know, Charlemagne, did you have any other insights?
Yeah, so one thing that's related to this point of left-right conversion and people we don't want on our side is Hassan Piker actually did a debate with Nick Fuentes and Sargon, and he had Destiny on his team, right?
I remember
And
that was a
so
snafu, to say.
there's this
least
moment
polite.
later in the debate, like 2.5 hours in or something, where Hassan Piker actually says that if the right is correct about racial differences in IQ, then it basically justifies their worldview of eugenics and genocide. So this guy actually thinks that if racial IQ differences exist, then it justifies like eugenics and genocide. And just, I was actually blown away when he just said this on the stream because A, that's not actually what people on the right believe, but B, it was crazy that his mind instantly jumped to just like,
Yeah.
these eugenics programs and actually removing people from society. That's the whole premise, right?
To be quite honest, these people kind of scare me. The people like
it is
who
scary.
are like, yeah, they're like they're the second they a people's like a third world people's seems to go against the progressive line, they're like genocide them. I'm like, whoa, Vouch, what are you doing, buddy?
Yeah, well,
what are you talking about? I mean, I was just thinking about having an immigration policy that was more geared towards people who were culturally similar to us, and you're going straight on to genocide. It's quite alarming, and that makes me kind of. When these people break off from the left, they're going to create a huge explosion. I'd rather have that explosion be not where my community is, have that explosion out in left land and cause chaos there, because these dirtbag left types aren't going to go down in a light way.
If you wanna, if I may interject here, just because I think like because like half my friends in real life are like reactionary Catholics like myself, but the friends I have at university, they're dirtbag leftists because I honestly, you can't stay around someone who's too much into intersectionality. That's just a headache.
Yeah.
But the way I see it is the dirtbag left it's not something that would explode so much as it would like fracture. Like a piece of them would easily fit with the ContraPoints type. A smaller piece of them would easily fit with like the alt-right if given just a little bit of a push. Again, I think it's something like it'll fracture like a glacier almost, and it'll like one part will float to the other. I don't think it's going to be an explosion, and I don't think it's something that could damage the left as like a broad political coalition.
I think they just all go like at the most. I think they maybe go like the Louis C.K. route, where they just become irrelevant, or they go like the whole Gamergate route, where they become like a counterculture community after the more ContraPoints left turns on them.
This is the problem, though. The whole product that the dirtbag left has is the ability to call people that aren't in it stupid or evil. Once they're all doing that to each other, and once their core audience of white urbanites has like all four of their favorite podcasters point to each other and call each other evil and stupid, the confidence that projects kind of goes away and the product disintegrates. And that's why I think this isn't going to work.
Yeah, we see that with their... Go, Lewis.
I was about to say, can we recap about what are we talking about at this moment? Because I think I'm a little lost.
Okay, kind of
are we
not,
implying
because
that
actually we're not, because we're going to try to segue away from this, Louis. So you can come in on the next time we open a super chat, but we can't relitigate what we just said. I'm sorry.
It's just a short statement.
If I may add one short thing.
Sure, go ahead.
On the dirtbag left, I find that name very fitting because guys, especially like Destiny, have been caught up in a lot of, let's say, underhanded activities online involving underage girls. And yeah, they wouldn't survive a day if they, split off from the dirtbag left and took on ContraPoints. Just on the level that they have no credibility as people. Um, I remember Charlemagne, you brought up the live stream where it was the debate between Sargon and it was Sargon Nick Fuentes versus Hassan Piker and Destiny. And a lot of the guys moderating were like people who used to be Twitch video game streamers who got caught up in a lot of e-drama and then had to jump ship. These are the kind of people we're dealing with, and um, I don't really see them as much of a problem. They're mostly just useful idiots for the cathedral, if you will, or the left.
Yeah, well, I think I don't want to say that we've beaten this to death, but I think we've kind of said what needs to be said. So maybe, do you mind if we move on to the next question? Louis, you can catch up because we're starting a completely different topic now. But unfortunately, this is a broadcast stream, so we're not doing recaps. At any rate, unless an audience member wants to see it. So it's okay. So $10 from New Zealand, Kiewich. Hi, Dave. I'm reminded of what you said to me after the craziness in my country post Christchurch. It was the importance of solidarity. Don't despair, guys. You have solidarity from around the world. Well, thanks, guy. Thank you, Kiewich. That's a good point, and we have to remember that because we are the minority, solidarity is important. So I don't know if there's a question there, but thank you so much for the sentiment. I don't know. I think
it reminds me of because it's something that's very near to me because of my Discord, which I'm fascinated by. Is like the main people that are on it. It's an Icelandic Lutheran and or Romanian Orthodox and me, an American Catholic.
Of course, this is a huge problem because it means that we're having difficulty organizing locally. Unless the communities get really big, the possibility of breaking off into local communities is incredibly curtailed. And so there's a problem there. I think we might be very slowly overcoming this issue, but it's something that's consistently dogged attempts at getting in real life organization. I will say that regardless of who this shooter turns out to be, we are going to get people are going to try to use it like Christchurch was used so that the left can dominate political discourse. I don't know if they'll succeed, but I don't know. Any more reactions to that?
So on quote unquote right wing terrorism, I don't see it as, by the way, a lot of these shootings politically motivated. Instead, they're acts of horrific freak violence by obviously mentally unstable people. And even though the wider society will not agree with my assessment here, but if anything, that confirms my reactionary beliefs that we live in a very broken time where which is having very deep psychological effects on people, and we're seeing it out in the light with horrific events like Christchurch. And quite frankly, even if there wasn't a quote unquote alt right or a radical right, there would still be these incidents of mass violence just because of the way the world is going.
I agree, but hold on, Fritz. I think that there is a phenomenon of right wing violence. I think it's always kind of touchy because these things are so infrequent that oftentimes two shootings doesn't constitute an actual trend. It's just a statistical blip. But I think at this stage we might actually be seeing an observable statistical phenomenon of right wing shooters. I think it's correct that it has to do with mental instability and family relations and just untreated mental illness. But also, on top of that, I think there's a phenomenon that these mentally unstable people are being drawn to something in right-wing ideas that's causing them to want to use it as a banner. But go ahead.
Could I offer a suggestion? Yeah, so I think part of it also has to do with the radical individualism present in our society today.
Yes.
I mean, if you go take a look at a lot of high schools, everyone says, hey, what would you fight for? What are you willing to do? How are you going to make the world a better place? And that, I don't know if that was always present within the U.S. Education system, or if that's a novel thing. But essentially,
Can't
we always tell
remember.
people you need to go. You need to do something great. You need to go be. You need to go to college to go be an astronaut, to be a physician, to be whatever type of person you want to be. So in our society, where at the end of the day, people have to take up the routine jobs, but we tell children, we tell ourselves that that is not really an occupation for anyone. But what happens is that people get desperate to really prove that, hey, I can make a difference in the world. And I think that's really what's driving violence, both on the left and on the right. When
Everybody wants
people,
to be a. Oh, sorry. Everybody
yeah, when
wants to be a
people
celebrity.
well, not even a celebrity. People want to think that, hey, I made a difference in the world in some way, and it doesn't even really matter. It's just that we emphasize, this "what would you fight for" mentality when most people really probably shouldn't fight for anything.
I think it's a double-edged sword here. There is the individualism, but it also this kind of ties in with a problem that I've had with like the right in general, and especially like the far right and like Wignat types. Something that like kind of made me like get out of the community for a while was there is kind of this lack of like systematic approaches to things. Like again, organizing. It's all about like a group of supervillains. So like if you look at the mosques, like like the synagogue shooting, like of course like there's this hyper individualism. I'm going to do this grand dramatic act that expresses all my frustrations and anger and insecurities about society, and also it's those people over there. It's not part of a structure. It's not institutional. It's like these people over here that I can like tangibly get rid of and just physically remove.
And there's also no way to sort of enact right wing ideas, qua
Mm-hmm.
right wing ideas. That doesn't seem to be fundamentally reacting against a group as opposed to building another up, which is why I think, in some sense, there's a little bit of cohesion to what Academic Agent says. We're a bunch of people who oppose progressivism. But after that, for myself, politically, my project is Christendom. So, to me, building that is the most important thing. After my family, of course.
I was going to say this is that like for all the talk people are going to have about mental illness and how that needs to be addressed, and like people pay lip service to this on both sides, but I think that's actually something the left is fundamentally afraid of delving into deeply, because I think if we actually want to address more of the roots of the mental illness, that's going to start asking some uncomfortable questions, as in, well, actually, people, these people tend to come from homes, single mother homes or broken homes and come from places, places that the left has basically advertised as being where people should be, or which is acceptable to live in.
I don't want to get into the whole second civil war on the way, sort of deal.
Hell?
That was a good
whole
impression of Alex Jones, my friend.
Yeah, exactly.
I thought it's John Mark.
But
well, either one, they all say the same thing.
I don't want to get into the whole Civil War discussion, but there's two YouTubers that I'd suggest everybody go check out: Monday Blue, and more importantly, Forward Observer. He's the guy who's been doing a 5-part series on essentially tracking the escalation of political violence in the country. In my opinion, I have a more long-term view. I think that obviously the United States has been having issues with mass shootings for the better part of the last 20, 30 years. I think that this is a phenomenon that the mainstream media has had
constantly misrepresented.
No, not constant. I don't want to say that they're culpable, but it was I forget the first mass shooting in the United States. First modern mass shooting in the United States, and it broadcast across the. Was it Columbine? I don't think Columbine was one of the flash.
There are many mass shootings but doesn't matter.
So
Make your point.
The idea is that these things have been going on for a while. They're horrific. We offer the prayers for the victims, but they've become not just politicized. Both sides politicize the mass shootings, or not both sides. I should say there's political motivations now for the use of mass shootings by both by fringe elements of the right and by the left to support things like gun control. And I think that's I don't think that's too controversial of a point to make.
I tend to like the left and the right both do it, but the left gets a lot more hay out of your average mass shooting than the right does by far.
Precisely. And I think that we can offer our condolences for the victims, and
absolutely
prayers, all the rest of it. But I think that what we're seeing now, particularly in the last 2 years, particularly after Christchurch and was being the most egregious example, is we are seeing a sort of a use of mass shootings by elements of by extremist white nationalists. I'm looking at the updates on the story right now.
Let's slow down. We're not going into news updates here.
But
so your point is that I might disagree. It sounded like you were saying that white nationalists were organizing this, not simply that statistically they happen to be white nationalists. I think, and this is an observable blip. Is that what you meant to say?
It looks. No, I was attempting to make the point that this looks like it's becoming a trend.
I think that's true. I think we're getting to the point where it's statistically significant, where we can say this actually is a phenomenon. There was actually,
to some extent,
it wasn't just random noise that happened to occur. This actually is a thing.
And sooner or later, I think, and I've been raising the alarm bell IRL for the last 2 years.
You're raising the alarm bell on what exactly?
I've been telling Sargon that he needed to start getting involved in activism.
Sargon's involved in activism.
Yeah, 2 years ago when I approached him at MythCon. But essentially, you made the point, Dave, and you're correct that the left is going to get hay out of this. So sooner or later,
a lot, yes.
I think that how to phrase it. Sooner or later, I think that online communities are going to have to find a way, are going to have to draw a line on these kinds of content, or these kinds of ideas, because there does seem to be an emergent trend where this sort of stuff is.
Now, earlier, I'll build off that before we go on to the next super chat. I was talking to the Franklin just on a private call because I'm friends with the guy and I was catching up with him, and we were both saying that the technology that's necessarily going to come about is going to be highly moderated and checked social networks, such that you can vet the people that go into them and that you can control for behavior. And perhaps China's sort of social media credit system is them actually jumping ahead of where everyone is going to go, that the future world is going to be a bunch of buy-in political communities that can vet and moderate people who come into them so that they naturally exclude psychopaths. And that might be something that we need to actually start thinking about. I don't know how you possibly do that given the current set of social media tools, but unvetted social media might be on the way out. And this could be a turning point that we're seeing right now. And that will come to replace it might be smaller versions of the Chinese controlled social system, social media point system. I don't know. It's something to think about.
Yeah.
Let me just add one thing to what Drifter said. I was watching Sargon's video on the shooting, and apparently manifesto posting was something that became popular on 8chan, where people would just post manifestos, and it seems like an inevitable consequence of that someone's actually going to end up acting that out. So it does seem like, as we alluded to earlier, this needs to be something that's simply not allowed on these platforms, free speech implications aside. I mean, we can't just have people posting ironic manifestos about their suicidal rampages on the internet, right? That's obviously not good for society.
Yeah, we'll have to see what comes of this. It becomes risky because then you get to this whole thing where, like, well, I don't know. It has to be more than just what can't be posted. It has to be like this is a community of people. Well, we all know that we're going to be. We all know that we are a certain quality of people, and that we can enact this elevation inside rules that we have.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of why I joined the Canis Society, is because it seemed like, unlike other reactionary groups, it was trying to go for something positive, specifically something Christian oriented. And I wouldn't say I'm entirely reactionary, but I have sympathies with it. And I think that going to a group where I can trust the values is why I came here essentially. So I appreciate that.
Yeah, I think the difficulty we're finding is just how do you organize in real life, because I don't think there's going to be meaningful organization without that.
I
Yeah,
And
do
I,
know.
then trying to
Sorry.
find a good platform where you can moderate these things in perpetuity without getting banned. And I don't trust Discord anymore. And I know I say this on Discord, but yeah.
Right now,
One
I do know the Boston community is trying to get a date together to meet up. So it isn't completely without effort, but I don't think there's been very
I
much
won't say
success so
which
far.
community I'm with, but we've been doing meetups,
Oh,
and
really?
there's more. Yeah, there's we've been getting together. You can talk to if you're interested, Dave. You can talk to Dagoth and Sursum and Ned.
Okay,
Uh,
excellent. Well, I'll have to do that. That's not pertinent to this stream, but
yeah, yeah,
thanks for
yeah.
bringing it
I
up. Yeah,
know.
it's
I,
it's
I don't want to get. I don't want to like sidetrack you
Oh
guys.
yeah, yeah, but
well,
it's great. We'll have to talk about that on a dedicated stream about organization, or if someone asks about it. But yeah, I'll let people know what my situation is. Obviously, like I said, I'm coming up on a hiatus, so
I think
it's
it's
gonna be touchy. Go ahead.
I think it's actually better for us at the moment that we do this in a more decentralized and underground manner so that we're not easily targeted. We don't
Yeah,
really want so like the fact that you didn't know that this was happening, but it is happening, actually kind of strikes me as us leveraging our advantages that we have at the moment
there's also
against
a
the cathedral.
problem with the fact that I have like a YouTube channel and I kind of kicked the thing
Yeah.
off. Where the thing is, I felt like my presence was literally curtailing the personalities of other leaders that just needed to pop up. Like everyone was just kind of like deferring to like the YouTube voices, and I didn't like that dynamic because it made it sort of like the everyone was under paralysis, right? They couldn't do anything. It was too top heavy, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that I'd much rather try to work on something locally and then plug that into something on the internet and do it in that direction rather than having trying to like if, kind of condense something from the internet into real life. That seemed to be having a very hard time working.
That makes complete sense because I mean the people who are going to make videos are just like more introvert nerds who like doing this and don't necessarily do want to do a bunch of public organizing. So I think that trying to the expectation that the YouTubers are somehow are going to come and do political activism or build a movement is the wrong way to go about it. I think
It's really hard. Yeah.
the people
Well,
interested in those things on the ground need to do it while we do our thing, you know.
well,
Yeah.
not to. The last time that YouTubers really got together in real life to do some IRL stuff, and I brought this up. This, ironically enough, I brought this point up at the Canis meet that we held most recently. Was those fine boys marching through Charlottesville?
Oh, good
But
lord.
you know, yeah, exactly. So my hope, my fear, my partial fear, and my hope is that Canis is not going to end up anything. I'm fairly certain. Am I clear in understanding that nobody here wants to go marching around with tiki torches and
Yeah, optics is the job of the Canis Society, and
yeah.
we're a non-violent organization. So, and you know, like
So, so
we have requirements here.
Well, I'm
Okay.
pretty sure
So
we're
I
all
have a
straight.
Optics
question
So
though.
matter.
How do we enforce these requirements and
That's
prevent
an
other
issue
people
that we
from?
haven't figured out yet, and that.
So
Okay.
yeah,
I'm gonna
like
head
my
out now. Thanks for having me on.
Thanks, Fritz. Good luck on your
Bye bye.
videos.
Thank you.
yeah,
Yeah, it's
that's
something that we've talked a lot about on the Canis Society's streams, and I encourage people to join the live stream channel there. But it's not something that I have a solution for. Not to get too sidetracked onto a technical issue, but
yeah.
it's something that we just it becomes impossible. This is another reason why in real life is connections are needed because it becomes impossible to kind of like get binding agreements online.
Yeah.
It's utter. No matter how you slice it, it's impossible. You can have as many tiered permission systems as you possibly want. If you're doing anything more than building a Wikipedia, it's insane.
Yeah.
But anyway, let me read more super chats here. So I think I already read Stars Over Stalingrad. Yeah, merely opposition to progressivism. So $10 Stars Over Stalingrad. Thanks so much for that super chat. It's anti-progressives being labeled as on the right, and they're merely a uniting position to progressivism. Yes, thank you for that contribution. So the next one is £5 from Jan Sitterberg. Any thoughts on the place for the masculine and feminine on the distant right? I experience the current moment as effeminate and underhanded. Keep it up. Well, I think this is great because I've seen. Well, I'm going to mention one YouTuber in particular for the feminine side. Critical Condition has been doing yeoman's work. And what I love about that is it's 100% female, and they can talk about all the female issues over there. It's for them, by them. You know, if you want to watch it as a man, that's fine. But I think the problem always lies when you have intermingling and there's this drama that erupts, and that can be quite disastrous. And I think that the separation is really, really good. But I don't know. The masculine and the feminine, anyone want to take that on?
Well, I would say if you want to have a good understanding of the concepts of masculine and feminine in the construction of Western civilization, you should read Sexual Persona by Camille Paglia. I enjoyed that book a lot. So if you're interested in these concepts at all, including the concepts of Dionysus and Apollo, which sort of correlate to those, that's a really good book to read. And I do think that's an interesting point you make regarding separation. We do tend to, or at least we used to have male and female spaces in real life, and perhaps going that path on YouTube as well is a really good idea. I'm looking at our channel now, and I see that these girl talk videos.
Yeah,
that's quite interesting. I might check those out. And
they're really the what's good about them is that the fact that they're in a casual mode, and they're not there's no super chats. That's like if she had done these as live streams with super chats, it would have ruined the mood entirely. Totally would have ruined it, right? But because it's a casual conversation that just happens to be recorded, the mood and the is kept under control and centered on the world and not centered on any male audience, and that is essential. And so I think that's, and I don't want to interfere with that at all. Obviously, my wife, I think, shares a lot of opinions with that particular YouTuber. I said she should go on, but I think I don't know. I don't think it's really her jam. But man, I sound like I'm from the '90s. But
is she all that?
Yeah, exactly.
Radical.
And but anyway, that's good. I don't know if that's exactly what Jen meant by the question, but that's what immediately leapt to mind. I think that there was a huge on sort of the more alt-right side of, there was this huge purge about a year ago that was insane with this whole thought thing. Not that I didn't see what the problem was, but I felt like the reaction was almost worse than the disease. But I'm going to keep on going here because we're coming to the end of the super chats and we need to wind the stream down. So for $5, Monsieur Bojangles, if you were to mandate your followers read 5 books, any genre, what would they be? Either to understand the present moment or your opposition's view. Well, if someone answers that question, our opposition's view, people should read The Conquest of Bread by Peter Kropotkin, or as I call him, Crackpotkin. That's a perfect encapsulation of the left view. It's really a contentless book. It's like everyone should have everything, and if you disagree, you're terrible. is
everything is theft except actual theft. That's fine.
everything is something like a way of putting it. What? Everything is theft except theft.
Well, because anarchists are always like property is theft, like having a manager is theft. But if you just like go into like a Walmart and like take what you want, that's not theft.
That's not
like,
theft. You need it, right? Yeah. Then that's it, it's. I'd say Kropotkin is essential reading because it's so amazing that people think it's profound. And I think that I really perhaps need to reread it again to understand why people think it's profound. Because I'm not, I feel like I'm missing something. I'm missing something real here.
Yeah, at least Marx's Capital takes like some intellectual wherewithal to like to understand and then to do that. But like Kropotkin, like the anarchist type life, it's just total fantasy land. Not even like the pretension of having a
it's not even like a theory, right? Like where he lost me is when he said, so we're going to distribute the houses in Russia or inside one of these countries on a first come first serve basis, and no one will be unhappy that they get less good houses. After all, people accept bread when war rationing is done on a first come first serve basis, so it's ridiculous to think that the working class would ever be unhappy that they happened to be assigned a hovel and their neighbor a mansion. And I'm thinking,
I could just hear John Lennon's Imagine play in the background.
I think I probably woke up my wife because when I was reading that, well, no, she was in Canada. But when I read that, she might have heard me all the way from Canada, because when I read that, I was reading that, I was thinking like, what? What are you? Well, I have leftists who are going about to knife each other over a 3x4 apartment with a cot in it in San Francisco, and you're telling me that those woke people from the working class are going to just placidly go along with a permanent redistribution of houses where they're completely screwed over?
Yeah, that analogy just makes no sense.
Yeah,
I don't live in the same bread for 30 years.
Well, I would say that a lot of I think the appeal of Kropotkin is really if you really understood what he's arguing against with Conquest of Bread, because Kropotkin was
what
I read a little bit about him, and I think he studied wildlife as sort of his.
He was a geologist. But I want to say to the chat quickly, last super chat's at 11, please.
Oh, sorry.
Because we're winding down this conversation.
All right.
But go ahead. What were you saying about who was you refuting?
Well, he was trying to refute the idea of social Darwinism by.
That's a charitable interpretation.
Well, I think it's interpretation that a lot of leftists get at least at that time period got from it, because social Darwinism was.
I can't imagine a worse refutation of social Darwinism than Conquest of Bread. Social Darwinism is false because humans will behave in ways we've never seen actual humans behave. When we're honest about examining history. I mean, I don't know. I would love to go into a debate like that.
So this was an attempt to have a right hook at Herbert Spencer, and it missed, basically.
Right. Well, yeah, Kropotkin was trying.
Oh, yeah, nicely done.
Kropotkin guys, was try to paint a narrative of how he talked about animals of the same species cooperate in the wild. Why can't humans do that? And he has the typical leftist answer. Well, it's because of capitalism, of course.
Yeah, it's in capitalism. It literally becomes this magic word for which everything that we've observed everywhere in history can just be attributed to capitalism. But to go on, because the question was not about Kropotkin, but about books we recommend, I would say a good pop overview of the distant right would be Michael Malice's new book. I thought that was pretty good. I think that metapolitical theory, Moldbug, I'm gonna sound like obvious. He's kind of an obvious choice, but and he's rambly as all hell, but I think he gets a very good metapolitical analysis of present left versus right dynamics, as well as how he got here. Any other suggestions?
I guess if you're interested in the metapolitical level, I would echo the Malice recommendation. That was a really good book.
I'd say Malice is more political. I'd say Molebug is more metapolitical.
Mm-hmm.
Revolt Against the Modern World, Julius Evola.
Well, I have Julius Evola and Peter Kropotkin on my shelf together because I think that they're kind of... I can't imagine a more right or a more left-wing book. I want to organize my political books from right to left, and I think that they'll bookend the entire collection. You know, because I don't think you can get to the left of Kropotkin. I don't think you can get to the right of Evola.
Yeah, like there's like one person like Gwenon who's equivalent to Evola, but he's just right wing in some different ways, mostly the same. But
well, I might contest the characterization, but
well, Genon was more toned down than Evola. He didn't have Evola's
esoteric.
fiery, exactly. Very apolitical as well. I would also advise to anyone of the Christian faith to read Augustine's The Confessions.
That's
I believe it's a must read, and I personally put it above the Summa Theologica because it just puts the ideas and the personal experiences of faith in such a beautiful manner. But not only that, it's very relevant towards the debates we have today because with anti-Christianity, with how Augustine talked about the Manichaeans, and also it's a very good introduction to theology.
if you want a broad brush view of history, I hope Dave backs me up on this, but The Everlasting Man is, yeah, it's broad, but it's rhetorically beautiful. It's a great introductory book. It helped get me where I'm at. I'd recommend that.
It's odd because it's that's one of my. I mean, I think it's a good book, but it's one of my least favorite Chesterton books. It's too much like I know it's a reply to H.G. Wells' Brief Outline of History, but I'm not so sure I agree with the project of creating like an official version of history like that. I don't know. Maybe someone could teach me an interpretation of the book that would be more productive.
Well, I don't think he would have pretensions of being like, this is the official history.
Something's caught me as off about that. I don't know why, but it's a good book. People should read it. I just for reasons, for perhaps personal reasons, it didn't quite click with me.
On that note of must-read books and authors, Fyodor Dostoevsky. Personally, I think he's a must-read, but
absolutely,
the one most relevant to our conversation would be his book Devils or the Possessed, and
I haven't read that.
It's brilliant. It's basically about these revolutionaries. They're complete degenerates, but basically they came from the liberal, well-educated upper crust, and they return to this kind of small, aristocratic, sleepy town, and they hatch a plot to take it over via communist revolution. And it's so brilliant because Dostoevsky psychoanalyzes these people down to the finest detail. He understood these people's mentality, and it was brilliant. He wrote it as a reaction to another Russian liberal author named Ivan Turgenev, and it's a brilliant book, and it very well written, and it's almost like a drama by Shakespeare. It's that brilliantly written.
I just finished. It's funny. I read this book after I read The Idiot and the Brothers Karamazov. Then I read Notes from the Underground, which is like a leaflet you could read in like a single sitting. But I think Notes from the Underground very much captures like the internet era, like the social isolation.
It does, doesn't it?
Yeah, it is.
You almost imagine you could always say like you could almost retitle it Notes from 4chan or Notes from 8chan.
Yeah. It's like if Insult is rap, then like this is like Grandmaster Flash. This is like the original, the OG of like internet shut-ins.
Yeah, I'm not so sure. I mean, from Notes from the Underground to Chris Chan, but
crap.
I feel like
I have to throw one manifest.
I don't think it's an equivalent because Chris Chan at least has like he's not intellectually paralyzed. He's otherwise paralyzed, but He has like an imagination world that he can like gleefully enter. Like the underground man, he's just too loaded with information. He just ends up nowhere.
Yeah, that's true.
I feel like I should throw one out
Notes
there.
in the underground.
Second World Wars, Victor Davis Hanson. Go take the online course at Hillsdale College. Pretty awesome.
I have not read that one yet, but it's on my list.
It's actually written like he's doing the online course over at Hillsdale. They're uploading the stuff to their YouTube channel. It's really good. It'll make you feel patriotic as wait, I can't curse on this stream.
I think it's good. I do like Victor Davis Hanson's informational theory of war. I think that's a correct component of our theory of war that seems to be missing from progressive descriptions of war.
Yeah.
And it kind of it dovetails with formalism quite nicely, which is why I think it's interesting. I when you said Hillsdale College, I remember I have all these commercials that pop up in my YouTube, and one of them is for a Hillsdale College Constitution class, and the guy who's advertising it, like, he could not look more boomer if somebody from 4chan painted him, and he comes on, he's like, the Constitution is not just a document, it's a tool that opens all these doors about how our government works. I'm like, I'm thinking, like, what are you talking about? Like,
it's hilarious.
Like, you mean how our government ignores that? Like, is that the addendum to the class? And by the way, kids, this hasn't been real law since the government more or less overturned it in the New Deal era, in which we established that with the correct constitution of the Supreme Court, you could more or less ignore any part of the Constitution, or post 1973, you could read any new right into it.
Yeah. Is it the guy who looks like a gnome?
Yeah, that's him.
Yeah,
like,
that's the president. Yeah, exactly. That's the president. That's Larry Arnn. He's a cool guy. Like, his Aristotle class is pretty good, but if you go like, don't bother with for most of the other stuff, unless you want like boomer PragerU style course. Arnn is pretty good on a lot of the basic philosophical Greco stuff, but
I'm sure he's quite a good scholar. But his ability to sell the Constitution, when 60% of this country believes that the Constitution is more or less just whatever we think it is at any given time, and that Ruth Bader Ginsburg can understand whatever rights are part of the Constitution as part of her quote-unquote jurisprudence. The fact that we think that the understanding the ins and outs of it gives you a key to wielding the government as we currently experience it in reality. I heard that statement and I was just like it was just oof. It was just, it was
Yeah. Constitution
I couldn't
worship
properly react to that.
Constitution worship is like the saddest dead religion there is. It's like if you found someone who really believes the pharaoh was the god king and they're just waiting. It's like been 4,000 years since we've had one. It's I don't even know how to describe it.
One of the funny things is if you actually go and see the Constitution, it's almost not there anymore. It's basically a blank piece of paper, which I think is very fitting.
It's slowly the ink stains are slowly beginning to evaporate away, basically. It's interesting.
Let me just throw out a recommendation with the same one I referenced earlier, Sexual Persona by Camille Paglia. If you're interested at all in the concepts of the masculine and feminine, especially from a historical and mythological perspective, it's pretty much a must read. Like, if you enjoy Nietzsche's The Birth of Tragedy or Evola's esotericism on this subject at all, definitely recommend this book. It'll really give you a very well documented understanding of how these concepts developed in civilization.
Oh, and if you want to have the opposite, like what the opposing side believes, like for a specific topic, Michel Foucault's History of Sexuality, that's basically like the building block for like all the like the deconstructive attitudes towards sex and gender that are present today.
I wanted to ask if there was any particular work by Thomas Aquinas that would be recommended. I haven't read much by him, but I have respect for knowing his beliefs through secondhand, essentially. So I was wondering if there's a work particularly you recommend.
The Summa Theologica is the best place. I'm probably butchering that, but the Summa Theologica is probably the best place to start.
Yeah, just find a good guide with it.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, no problem. But honestly, I would advise you read Augustine first because Aquinas is a lot more complex and he's a lot harder to understand. He requires more of a understanding of philosophy.
I'm just gonna out and say it. We had a Catholic book group at my former parish with a rock star Polish priest. We could not get through the Summa Theologica. It just did not translate well. We had to go to interpreters. I
Okay.
don't know what to say. I think it's a the ideas are great, but the primary source is just
Well, that's because the book itself is supposed to be it was written as a textbook. I mean, have you gone through like a college
I've read textbooks many times. This is beyond what we would ordinarily assume to find in a textbook. Maybe this read just like your standard linear algebra book in the 1300s. It is very esoteric at this stage and very hard to get through.
Well, I think well the thing is I think it was supposed to be like an advanced textbook of the supposed to be all the basics of what someone would have been taught in the universities. I mean,
okay, but 700 years ago, it's still that does not defeat the fact that for modern readers, it is a very big ask to read that book. So approach that with care,
and it's unfinished.
I wouldn't.
And we will go on here. So,
another boneheaded suggestion people always do is the City of God because it's like the most famous church father book. But do not start with that. I doubt more than a dozen people in world history have read that cover to cover.
Yeah,
read the Confessions.
Yeah, that someone can do easily.
Yeah. I have one last super chat for $2. Samurai Squirrel says, "Trad thoughts are not trad. Change my mind." I don't think that's a serious question. I don't even know what a trad thought is. I know that probably every female right-wing YouTuber has been accused of being a trad thought. I mean, I'm sure they exist, but I never come across one that I thought was just doing it for the super chat money. Although I'm assured by people who watch Nick Fuentes that they're just everywhere and they're just clogging up the interwebs. So I how about this? We're kind of this is like the last stretch since we're out of super chat time, and so thanks everyone for watching. A lot more people joined the chat than I thought would, so I apologize if it's a little bit disorganized. Just to go through and introduce people, we have. Let me see if I can introduce them. We have Charlemagne, who has an excellent YouTube channel, and everyone should subscribe to him. He has a lot of videos on Molebug that I watched. Dominic, who I don't know much about you other than my Twitter interactions with you.
I don't really. I just have like a Twitter that I've had the idea of a YouTube channel. If I ever do have the time and inspiration, maybe, but it's kind of like, let's start a band. It's just something that's never going to happen. It's just sort of like a bucket list thing.
Since a lot of people here are more private individuals, I'm going to leave the introductions aside for people who don't have social media presences. I do know Geocon/Buckley, you have a YouTube channel. And of course, everyone probably recognized Fritz Imperial from the YouTube channel Fritz Imperial, who was on previously. So there's that too.
I'm trying to. By the way, I'm trying to find out what I should do for my YouTube channel. I mean, so far I only have the idea of doing response videos to left to.
Unfortunately there's just no way. I've learned from experience there's just no way for other people to tell someone else to do something, because the best way to make a video is to get super excited about it and do it all at once. And the closer you can get between the time where you have the idea, write the outline, and record it, the more quickly and the more efficiently that YouTube video is going to get made. So, it's a challenge, but I think that when you look at people like Millennial Woes, you see the evidence of paralysis by analysis made manifest. As soon as that person started thinking about making the videos, he never made another one. And that's happened to many a YouTuber. And it's just, you just have to be able to find something you're passionate about and try to do it all. I mean, as much, you don't do it all at once. Don't create that artificial barrier, but don't mull it over to the point where you never go through with an idea, is my recommendation.
Yeah, and I'm not a YouTube guy, but like an advice for anything is be willing to screw up. Like you look at the development of cartoons or anything like creative, you look at the first episode compared to the most recent season, you'll see like a constant change.
Yeah, so I'll tell you the story of how I got involved in YouTube if people are interested. No, I did a series of lectures at an atheist forum for thought while I was a grad student in Seattle. And some of them became YouTube videos, and I uploaded those. And I had a blog called The Distributist, or The Data Distributist, that was kind of lame. It was more or less just musings, and I didn't have my thoughts organized enough. But I was listening to people like Sargon of Akkad, thinking, man, if only Sargon of Akkad could hear about how people in my kind of Orthodox Catholic circle talked about ideas, they'd get set straight. And then there was at one point where Sargon, he had a debate with Christy Winters, and then he had a debate with Michael Brooks from the Majority Report, and they were just the stupidest things. That they were just the most amateurish mistakes ever. And I felt like watching them, I was just going to explode. I wanted to just reach into the monitor and shake Sargon and go, no, stop. And so I felt forced. I remember coming from grading papers, and I was grading papers really quickly so I could go make this video, just so there would be the off chance Sargon could not make these boneheaded mistakes. And then after I got the initial start, I realized that I more or less could just take the insights from the Catholic community I was in and kind of combine them with my own intuition, and people kind of like that. And then I guess the story of my channel is seeing how that Catholic consensus was... I think the spirit of that Catholic consensus is more than sufficient to confront the problems of modernity, but the form of that Catholic consensus was in many ways not. And I think it required a broader appeal to ideals that were a little bit more radical of the metapolitical variety. And I don't want to put down anybody, because that was an astonishing community and amazing. But I think that the problems that it knew about it pointed to ideas that were not beyond the spirit, but beyond the place that people were thinking. And I'm being vague, but I don't want to go on. So does anyone want to talk about any thoughts before we close the stream?
Yeah, I'm sorry. Do you want to go? Or should I? I'll go.
Just as a quick question to Dave. Once you go on hiatus, is that just going to be... yeah, I'm sorry.
Sorry
tomato,
about that.
Tomato.
Yeah.
Once you drop off the grid, is that going to be just total deep six, no contact?
No. All my channels are going to be up. My email account's going to be up. I might even make a video.
All right.
I might even make a video every now and again. But what I can't reliably do anything. I can't reliably answer questions. I can't reliably tweet about anything. I can't reliably release content. And to me, it's better to just say, guys, for these 6 months, I'm just not going to make anything. And then what I'll try to do is I'll try to store up content and then come back and release a regular video schedule and then go on hiatus again. So I'll be contactable, but I'm just not going to reliably be able to do anything.
Understood.
It's more of a time contraction than a decision.
All right. Roger that.
And if you've followed some hints in the chat, I'm sure you'll understand the reasons for that.
Yep.
But I'm not saying anything officially over why this hiatus is occurring. Yeah. So I'm not going away. I'm just receding into the background.
Congratulations,
unspecified amount of time.
Speaking unofficially, congratulations.
Oh yeah, thanks, thank you. Yeah, it's probably people who can put two and two together here.
Someone put 2 and 2 together. That's for sure.
Okay, yeah. Anyway. I think you
Slow
mean 1
clap.
and 1, but anyway. But it is California. Any other thoughts? I guess this is a rather disorganized live stream. As I don't know any way to really have a multiple person distance. I always feel like I'm either neglecting the chat or I'm cutting people off. But the problem is I literally have to cut people off to make sure that we get through the super chats. Otherwise, that's not fair to the people who paid money, right, guys? So I appreciate you understanding when I interrupt you, even to introduce my own opinions. But any last thoughts or topics that we can deal with in like 10 minutes?
I think that it's just
Go ahead.
important to stress positive beliefs. Basically, I think that it's important that we don't end up just being a collection of people who oppose progressives and do have positive beliefs. That's all I just wanted to say. I know we kind of touched on that earlier, but
yeah, absolutely. I mean, my positive beliefs are Catholicism. My positive intellectual project is post-liberalism. I'll say that. I guess instead of neo-reactionary, I prefer the word post-liberal. I'm learning to transition to that a little bit more. And my positive political loyalty is Christendom. So I think between those things, I have my positive, or my positive temporal loyalties to the family or my family. But anyone else want to comment on that insight?
Oh yeah, an alliance based on mutual hatred is pretty fragile. Like it's short term at best. I mean, it's just common sense.
But political proximity, I think we have that. I think that I think that a lot of people in that chat probably could get on board with those three things, as I said, were positives. And I'm sorry, I'm drawing a blank. I think to the extent that we disagree, it would probably be that we have something that's close to one of those three things that we like instead of it.
I think that that's correct. I personally am more libertarian than I would say post-liberal exactly, but I wouldn't say I'm fully libertarian either. I don't really buy it as a social philosophy. I just kind of think that it's effective usually when it's implemented. But I would say that that is close enough that it ends up being, particularly because we have the banner of Christendom essentially that
well, I don't want to be snarky with libertarianism, but I'm fine tabling my disagreements with libertarianism as long as you don't mind the occasional video criticizing you guys. I just will say that even if libertarianism is true, you don't want to be the person caught bringing a political tool to a meta-political gunfight, which I feel libertarianism often does. But
I would completely agree. I would definitely agree with that.
I think libertarians kind of need to swallow the pill that they sort of had their turn, and they kind of need something. They need something with a bit more force in it, which is something we can bring. Libertarianism is just sort of too weak on its own to really compete at a political level, and libertarians are just going to have to accept that they might have to ally with people they would rather be exclusive to, and that's just kind of how it is for all of us.
Well, if you look at the history of libertarianism, it's always been the libertarians allying themselves to a more powerful movement.
Okay, but that's funny you mentioned that, Buckley, because if libertarians can't, the problem with libertarianism as a political philosophy, even if, like I said, it is true, once you get into a chaotic political situation, well, you know what libertarians can't do? They can't really bargain, because as soon as they bargain, they're no longer libertarians, and you cut off your alliances with the most common political persuasion, which is rent seeking, which everyone else can negotiate with rent seekers except for libertarians because they're constitutionally incapable of doing that. So if you're a Machiavellian, and in some sense I do draw on Machiavelli, even though spiritually I have to condemn him, which is a strange contradiction in my own soul, but there you have it. Unfortunately, libertarianism fails as a practical solution in a chaotic situation for that reason.
What strikes me about libertarianism is that, like I do see like a logic to the libertarian to alt-right pipeline is that libertarianism is like the first approach. Like, okay, we can just kind of passively avoid all these problems by just kind of like cutting the sources of power that progressives could seize. Well, eventually it gets to the point where it's like, okay, the progressives already seized them. There's no way we could reduce this government. We need to have something that's an active, positive force.
Well, I always thought the libertarian to alt-right pipeline was, oh, hey, look, there are metaphysical, cultural, and spiritual necessary preconditions that allow you to operate a libertarian society and preserve it in the long term. But all that's complicated. I can't learn metapolitics, and I don't like spirituality because I'm like a new atheist, Christopher Hitchens type. So what's the simplest, stupidest, most brain-dead proxy for all of those complicated concepts? Oh, I know. Whiteness. Boom, I'm all right.
Well, the issue with libertarianism is that it presumes a certain cultural and social context.
Exactly. You can proxy in race for that and save yourself all sorts of complicated, scary thoughts that might track you into more. It might place certain questions on your relationship to modernity and consumption and all that stuff.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to look at the history of libertarians forming odd alliances with for more power, look at Murray Rothbard. The guy who created anarcho-capitalism. In the 70s, he allied himself with Maoists and the Black Panthers.
David Duke.
And then in the 90s, he allied himself with David Duke and Jared Taylor types.
Wow, that guy certainly knows how to pick the winners. Jeez, can I get his horse betting races bet so I know who to bet against?
Well, if you looked at...
I mean, wow, that's exactly who I want to pick up. I want to pick up the Maoists in the 70s just before they lose power. And then I want to switch my allegiances to David Duke in the 90s, just as he's at the low point of his, like, political... I mean, gee...
The last person he was known to speak with, the last person he was seen with was Hillary Clinton.
Oh no! I'd like to clarify, but what I mean by libertarianism, I don't mean it in the. I would have said classical liberalism, but I feel like that's too associated with Sargon with this group. But I'm really more of a fan of like the original writers, John Locke, that sort of thing, and it's more as a ideal system that could be implemented when there is more order. Essentially, I should clarify that I realize it is not working right now, and I don't see policies moving this direction, unfortunately.
Sure. I understand, but since we're closing, if I wasn't Catholic right now, I'd propose we conduct a séance next time we want a séance with the spirit of Rothbard. The next time we want to short the market. I mean, gee, the guy seems to be an uncanny ability to pick losers. Just.
If you read Rothbard was like a character. He as a philosopher, he wasn't that smart.
Sure, and we're not. Let's not get into a history about Rothbard. We're kind of winding down.
Sorry.
But does anyone have any closing thoughts? I guess perhaps just look, since this is called looking forward. Anything they're looking forward to? Thoughts on how politics is going? Hopefully, that can be wrapped up relatively quickly.
Well, I just have a few short things to say. Well, first off, Dave, congratulations with everything, and
Thank you.
when you take your hiatus, make sure to relax. But I just wanted to ask that.
Go ahead.
I wanted to ask maybe this is too much to ask, but a lot of people in the kind of society have wanted you to be more involved with our group or with the group you established, and a few people in the community have asked you about this, and it seems that a few people, how to put it, are it seems as if things are a little tense, but in reality we just want some guidance from the person who sets it up, if you understand what you're saying.
And I totally agree that I've been, but like, I guess the question is, how do I interact with it in a way that is time sensitive to what I have to deal with, right? I can dedicate an hour or two every week to just that, but the problem is I can't be like hanging around the Discord the way I was with clear trads, because A, I don't have no motivation to, and B, I just don't have the time anymore.
I think looking forward, we need people to organically rise up from the community to take on these responsibilities, and it can't all be put on Dave or anyone else, and that's kind of just the way it has to be.
And the more you build around me, the more you're going to lose in 3 months.
You cut out there, Dave.
I said the more you build into me as a single point of failure, the more you're basically going to lose in 3 months. Because I'm certainly not going to be doing those things in 3 months, even if because I don't know. I mean, there has to be some, and I'm not going to say the Can Society took a big hit when I lost clear trads, because I just lost a whole Rolodex of people on Discord. And I lost the belief that anything I put on Discord would be permanent. And none of the other things that have ever been established have been able to replace that. And so it's
well let me ask you this, Dave. What is your personal vision for the Canis Society? Like, if it is it going to become like, I know you have your values and Catholicism and the rest of it, but if this project, if Canis becomes something that Dave the Distributist ideally would be able to sort of envision, is it like an activist group? Is it, are we going to be hitting?
It's a social justice, and it's a social justice and intellectual community.
Okay, so it's like meetups.
So it has to be if it's not in real life, then I'm not saying it can't start online, and the whole idea was to experiment to see if we could start something online that could condense into real life.
And that we will eventually move IRL.
And if you're asking me why this hasn't happened yet, it's
no. I'm not condemning anything. I'm just curious if your personal vision for the project is.
My personal vision for the project was to create the seeds of intellectual and social justice driven communities in real life. Okay. The ideal and most workable thing the Canis Society could do would be to act as sort of a theology of a theology on tap thing, the way that theology on tap or various speaking circuits worked in Seattle, such that this is what my church did. So we would have various speaking circuits that worked like theology on tap, but they were more focused on our parish. I'm not going to name the name of these things because you could easily dox me if I did. But what we would do is we would invite sympathetic intellectuals, and then I'd use these sort of dinners. There's basically a dinner. Everyone would come, socialize, question and answer session, and then I'd use those dinners as a way to recruit people for social justice expeditions that would occur every Saturday and Sunday. So you do about 2 hours of community service. And this whole organization could collectively claim that. And it was this, I was thinking if people could do this, it would be totally unassailable. It would be amazing if people on the right could do this, because you could get young people to give energy to a good cause. Everyone left those dinners having a wide Rolodex of people who were connected into the institutions of Seattle. And not only that, people could rely on volunteer workforces for a variety of projects locally. And I left that parish because I moved, and I also got wrapped up in my PhD work and a YouTube channel. But I always dreamt of replicating that and seeing how it could flower forward. And that was what I originally had imagined when I started this. But unfortunately, it can't exist without in real life. Not that it can't start online, but the things that I always imagined were... Because what does a big community of online people even look like? It could be my YouTube channel. That's 20,000 people. 20,000 people of activists. If they were all activists, and they were all condensed in a reasonably large geographic region, our problems would be over. But it's not. So I don't even know what a reasonably large online community means if it cannot be moved into in real life stuff.
And so this is sort of like the networking phase where we're going to try and move Canis IRL, see if we can do meetups and that sort of thing.
That is the goal eventually to do, and that's something that we've just been struggling with. And it's not something. It's not like we did this like we knew how to do it. It's like we made this to see if we could do it, with the understanding explicitly that since no one has done this before, there's a very large possibility that this does not work as well as we think it is. But what else are you gonna do? Nothing, right? Like complain about things online.
Yeah.
Well, you're saying that we need to not depend on you so much, and I don't like that idea. So I'm just gonna when you die, I'm just gonna have you in a mausoleum like Lenin. We'll lay you in state, and people will come to the shrine and they'll be converted to reactionary thinking.
Well, thanks. I have to end the stream, guys. I've run up against even my extended deadline for ending this stream. So I'm going to thank everyone for coming. And
thank you for having us on.
Yeah, guys. Well, it's been a pleasure hanging out. I will. If you guys get if the Kansas Society wants me to interact more, and we can come up with a schedule for me to help out, I'd totally be willing to do that. It's just I can't just kind of be ever present the way I was when I was kind of in between my PhD and having a full-time job.
Understood.
So anyway, guys. Thank you so much for coming, and thanks to the chat for
Strive is free.
Yeah. Anyway, guys, have a blessed next week, and I'll talk to you later.
Good night.
Bye.
Catch you later.